but a historic night from one Walker Kessler. Get into it on the program today. Talk some college basketball, talk some NBA basketball as we are high speed ahead to March. And the madness is right around the corner. Utah Hockey Club is back in action tonight. Minnesota's in town. Minnesota's a good team. Utah Hockey Club in need of points down the stretch. And we are about 1 week away from the trade deadline in the National Hockey League. Bill Armstrong, now friend of the program. We had Bill on this week. I asked him about the potential of making a move or a couple of moves potentially prior to that March 7th deadline, and Bill was very honest about how they are making their assessments and whether or not they need to do something prior to the trade deadline and solidify this roster for the stretch run. Utah Hockey Club finds themselves right in the mix for a wild card playoff spot. And all year long, that's what we've been talking about as far as the expectation for this team. Will they be able to finish it off, make the wild card round, make the playoffs? And tell you what, man, if you've never experienced Stanley Cup hockey in the pro ranks, it's a lot of fun. Right now, the Utah Hockey Club finds themselves 4 points behind Vancouver. Colorado's been really good as of late. They're a full 9 points behind the Avs, 3 points behind the Calgary Flames, 1 point ahead of the St. Louis Blues. So we'll do some hockey on the program, do a little NBA basketball, college basketball on the program as well. And, of course, the Combine rolls on. Prior to the NFL Draft, we'll give you some storylines in the Combine. A lot of players, both locally and nationally, participating in drills today. And a lot of rumors about what could happen at the top of the draft. Junior Tafuna, Brant Keithy, and Karene Reed are our 3 University of Utah local reps. So we'll do some basketball on the program today some football on the program today in addition to the basketball stuff, of course, the hockey stuff. Do a little RSL. RSL did RSL things last night and was ousted in the CONCACAF Champions tournament after making that that situation for the first time in basically a decade or so. That run was very short-lived as Herediano from Costa Rica rolled into town and was able to get a couple of goals and beat RSL 2-1. There is a striker on the way, so hopefully reinforcements. So 3 games for RSL this year and 1 goal so far, and that's what happens when you decide to move on from the majority of the players that were good in your attacking third. So we'll do a little soccer as well. We're jam-packed on this Thursday afternoon here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. The hooligans are back outside. Wow. The skateboarding hooligans have returned once again. It's becoming a theme here in downtown Salt Lake, right outside of our Broadway Media Studios. All right, our first guest right out of the gates, Neil Smith from the NHL Wraparound Podcast, former general manager of the New York Rangers, high-level scout for the Detroit Red Wings, also ran the Islanders for a while. Neil's going to stop by right out of the gates today. We'll do some basketball and some soccer with Andy Larson, some jazz and some RSL with Andy Larson from the Salt Lake Tribune. Tim McMahon stops by for your NBA Daily Assist. Latest on the Utah Jazz, big picture NBA stuff. We'll get a little sports court in as well with our friends from Handy and Handy on this Thursday afternoon. Neil Smith, Andy Larson, Tim McMahon, little sports court on a Thursday. Me, Spence Checketts, all of you, the great listeners. Happy Thursday. Almost to that weekend. It's right around the corner. And that guy, Porter Larson, on a Thursday afternoon. I might need you to run interference. I'm going to have to ask you to maybe play a little security guard if we keep having these hooligans skateboarding outside of our studio.
Oh, I'll do that.
Really?
I'll go handle business.
Will you pull a Karen?
Oh, yeah.
You will.
If I'm getting express written consent from my employer, I think we're good. I think we're covered. I'll kick some skaters' ass.
Well, I'm not the guy to give you the express written consent, so we're going to have to run that up the pipeline.
All right, James.
But it's a new thing. You know, James or Steve can sign off, and you can go take care of it outside. It's a new thing. Looks like they're creating content for potentially a YouTube channel.
I'll give them some content.
That's kind of the deal. You could go viral. If you go out and start complaining, maybe you'll go viral. Change your life.
Get hit with a skateboard, maybe.
How much NFL Combine do you find yourself consuming?
I don't consume much of it. I follow a lot of it. Obviously, the numbers, checking in on results and whatnot. But having been there, done that, seen that stuff in personally, it's the same thing. And you're just there for the results, or you're there to get an interview, to get a talk one-on-one with a player where you can find something out about him that none of us are going to see on the cameras. And that's really what the NFL Combine is about. So I don't really follow it live too much, but I'll I'll usually check in every few days and make sure we're up to date on the numbers.
So as numbers kind of spill in as it pertains to what our local guys are doing to the combine, we'll kind of give you an update, even though most of these things, I don't know, kind of silly. But a lot to do on a Thursday. Neil Smith's going to be our first guest. But on this Thursday afternoon, courtesy of our good friends at Prize Picks, it is time now for your opening tip.
Welcome to The Drive with Spence Checketts on Utah's #1 sports talk. Now into the studios of ESPN 700 to set the scene for the show. The opening tip of The Drive is brought to you by Prize Picks. Use the code ESPN 700 and run your game with Prize Picks.
All right, so a jam-packed night last night in the world of both local and local and national college basketball. In addition to what's going on in the world of pro basketball with Utah Jazz and the NBA. So let's run down a couple of storylines last night. So the Sacramento Kings were in town. They swept the Jazz this year. They won all 4 games against the Jazz this year. And ultimately, it's not really germane to anything that's real. So it doesn't matter if the Jazz win or lose these games. It doesn't matter if the Jazz are losing all these games. We know what time it is. We know what the Jazz are trying to do. But when something happens that is of note, hashtag take note, see what I did, that is actually real, it's important to kind of dig into what it could mean for the future of this basketball team, as the theme on our show when we cover the Utah Jazz is more of an eye to the future about what it will look like when they're actually good again, and it's more interesting to watch a team that's actually trying to win. This is a tough deal. When it comes to the ecosystem of pro basketball, it's a really odd thing that there's a good portion of the league every single year where the fan base is encouraged to cheer for them to lose. Now, nobody says that out loud, right? But that is the business of basketball. That's the way the NBA ecosystem has kind of manifested itself over the years as the game has changed, as the players have grown. I was going to say evolved, but I'm not sure if that's the right term. It's a different day and age that we're not necessarily all that used to here in the market when it comes to the Utah Jazz. For a number of different years, we are used to having very good competitive teams. And the way that those teams were built by savvy roster constructors, it's kind of hard to do it that way anymore with players' ability and willingness and desire to leave more often than we're accustomed to here in the market, right? And we've experienced it a ton. Really, John and Carl kind of spoiled everybody for the better part of 2 decades, but the stuff with Darren got loose. He was traded. We know the deal with Hayward, Donovan, in addition to Gobert. Like, a lot of these teams that were really, really good were broken down, or players just decided to bounce. And so it's a tough thing. And I keep drawing the parallel of this essentially being a project like building a home, where this is only the foundation. You can barely see anything above ground right now. Jazz are 14-44. They're the worst team in the Western Conference. They're the second worst team in pro basketball. The Washington Wizards have that honor right now. And there's not going to be a lot of winning down the stretch, and there is going to be a lot of minutes available for young players. But what happened last night at the Delta Center with the game that Walker Kessler had is important to kind of acknowledge as far as how historically special it was. There are 2 players in NBA history who did what Walker did last night. Those players are Nikola Jokic and Wilt Chamberlain. Walker Kessler in 34 minutes was 10 of 10 from the floor. He made every single shot, mostly layups and dunks. He had 14 boards. He had 25 points. He had 5 assists, 2 steals. No block shots, which was odd. But 2 players in NBA history have had games where they've gone for at least 25 points, at least 14 rebounds. They've had at least 5 assists while making every shot they took from the floor, with at least 10 field goal attempts. And now Walker is on that list with Wilt Chamberlain and Nikola Jokic. He was 5 of 7 from the line, so you love to see the improvement from the line. Didn't have any block shots officially, but changed a ton and was a menace in the paint. But my favorite part about what happened last night is that it was against Domas Sabonis. Okay, so Sabonis is a 3-time All-Star. You could have made the argument that he should have been an All-Star this year. And oftentimes when Walker's had really good games this year, if we're honest, it's been against teams that don't have great bigs. And Walker should be outplaying some of these bigs that he's going up against. But Domantas Sabonis has owned the Utah Jazz over the past 4 or 5 years. And Walker outplayed him by every measurable metric. And if you watch the game, Sabonis looked frustrated because Walker was doing everything that Will has asked him to do. It was kind of a rose on top of this thing, right? Because Walker's been good all year long. And last night, I think, was a a game that got Walker a lot of national attention as a result of it being historic, and a lot of people talking about it as far as what Walker was able to do. Now, of course, it came in a losing effort, but if you guys listen to this show, you know that I'm on board with this endeavor to lose because that's the necessity, even though it's really weird to ask your fan base to cheer for losses. It's counterintuitive to what we do and who we are as sports fans to actually want your team to lose. I hope at some point the NBA finds their way out of this where, like I said, every single year, like a third of the league isn't even trying. Because what it does is it dilutes some of the greatness at the top. So Cleveland and Oklahoma City are both on pace to win more than 70 games this year. That's never happened in pro basketball. But when you look at the landscape of the league, we have elite teams at the top, but it's hard to tell just how elite they are because the Jazz, the Pelicans, now the Spurs, they've joined in. Speaking of the Spurs, they've lost 4 straight games. Greg Popovich addressed his team last night and said he is not coming back. The Blazers have actually put some things together, but in the West, you at least have 3 or 4 teams that are completely unserious about winning. And in the East, it's kind of the same deal. And you have other teams that have joined the fray. Like, what does Philly do at this point? My guess is they probably just allow Embiid to have surgery, have him sit. They've lost 9 straight games. Paul George cannot look less interested in playing basketball. But Washington, unserious. Charlotte, unserious. Toronto, unserious. Philly now has joined that mix. And Brooklyn is also in the same spot where they're just simply not trying to win. Now, occasionally teams will rise up and start playing a little bit better here or there. I don't know what to make of the Heat. What are they doing? Are they trying to get in the lottery sweepstakes? But you have basically a third of the league unserious about winning. And what it does is it makes it really hard to analyze just how good the top of the league is. Like, is Oklahoma City, is the Cleveland Cavaliers, are they really historically special? Or are they just essentially capitalizing on the modern landscape of pro basketball where a lot of teams aren't even trying to win, right? And so when it comes to what the Jazz are trying to do, the only way to kind of cover this thing that makes sense in my mind is to analyze who could be around when they're good again and then talk about when certain moments manifest that are pretty exciting with the young players. And that moment that manifested for Walker Kessler last night at the Delta Center was really cool. Really happy for him because he's had a great year and he's answered a lot of questions after a down year when it comes to what he did during his sophomore campaign. All right, so University of Utah was at McHale last night. And, you know, this is a tough place to play. It's a really difficult venue, but it's also a really, really good basketball team. And of course, the storyline surrounding Utah basketball isn't one game against Arizona. It's the situation with Craig Smith, who has been let go from his job as the head coach of the University of Utah men's basketball team. So this was the first time we saw that team without Craig. And, you know, I kind of drew the parallel yesterday. This feels a little bit like the Mike Bajakian stuff when Mike Bajakian took over for Coach Ludd. And Mike was very honest during his first media availability. Essentially said, look, this is Andy's system. This is Coach Ludwig's system. I'm not going to come in and try to change everything. And it's like, well, what exactly was Mike supposed to find that Coach Ludd could not find? And it feels kind of the same thing with Coach Eilert right now as the interim head coach. And, of course, he's hearing all the rumors about Alex Jensen and whether or not ultimately he even has a chance to get this job. I don't think that he does. But that's just me. I could be wrong. Arizona won the game 83-66. A couple of takeaways. It looks like maybe Coach Eilert, Josh Eilert, is a little bit higher on Kiana Dawes than maybe Craig was. Kiana got a lot of minutes, and he was the one Ute that looked like he belonged athletically. He had 18 points. He had 10 boards. He was 6 of 8 from the floor, hit all 5 of his free throws. You know, Gabe couldn't really get any space. He was 2 of 10. Ezra just struggles against teams with length because while he is very savvy and crafty with great footwork and can finish with both hands, he's just not very tall. And so when you run into players that are just simply longer than you, Ezra's going to struggle. That's why I don't think he's an NBA guy. But really cool scene after the game. And we'll play this sound a little bit later on before we get out of here. If you missed Tommy Lloyd on Craig Smith's sons showing up. And if you didn't know, Craig's oldest son, Landon, is the team director of operations, and his middle son, Brady, is currently a walk-on for the Utes. His youngest son, Carson, is at North Dakota State. Carson played basketball for Mike Maxwell at Bountiful, so got to know him a little bit. But it was a really, really cool moment because if you have been listening to the show as far as how we've handled the news that Craig has been let go from his job, I really, when it comes to stuff like this, I try very hard, even though you as the listener and you as a Utah basketball fan, your interest is simply what's next for the program I care about and who's going to be the coach and is it the right hire. And I get that. And obviously that'll be the bulk of the coverage. But there is a human side of this stuff that we just don't do a good enough job covering in the media, in my opinion. And Craig and his wife, of course, the $5 million-ish parachute helps out, but these are good people, right? And their kids, their children are going to be affected. But what Tommy Lloyd had to say about Craig's kids showing up last night is worth your time. He got emotional. I mean, he had to compose himself as after they found out their father had lost his job. Landon still have a job to do. You're the director of operations. Brady, you got to show up. You're a walk-on with the Utes, So they showed up, they did their job, and I'm sure there was a lump in their throat probably all week long. So that to me was the coolest moment last night, what Tommy Lloyd had to say about Craig's kids showing up. We'll play that sound for you a little bit later on. BYU was able to get a win last night against Arizona State. Arizona State had 5 scholarship players available. They only had 8 players dressed on the bench, and essentially they were shorthanded, but BYU could not miss. They had 17 threes. They had 21 assists, and Richie Saunders continues to play his way into consideration for probably first-team All-Big 12, quite frankly. 26 points for Richie, had 6 threes. Trevin Nell, 5 of 6 from 3. They went 17 of 34 as a team from 3. You're going to beat everybody if you do that. So BYU was able to get the win. They've won 5 straight games now. They've gone 3 straight games with 90-plus points, with more than 12 three-point shots made, less than 12 turnovers, while shooting 50% from the floor. You know when the last time that has happened? Not this century. It's been that long. So BYU is playing really good basketball. Utah State with a tough loss against Boise State. With that loss, according to Joe Lunardi, has removed Utah State from the, quote, lock line on his bracketology. So a lot of basketball last night, fun basketball night last night. Jazz are off tonight. We'll get to what's next as far as the games coming up. Of course, we are going to do a little hockey on the program because the Utah Hockey Club is in action tonight. So we'll catch a quick break on this Thursday afternoon. We'll bring in Neil Smith coming up on the other side. But before we catch a break, I want to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks, which is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members, billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. It's very easy to use. If you've heard a lot of people, friends and family, talk about, getting into sports gambling, you kind of want to try it, but you don't want to learn all the terminology, this is the easiest way to do it because all you do is pick more or less on at least 2 players and their stat projections. So, for instance, last night with the Kings in town, you could have gone with, Domo Sabonis, more or less than 10 rebounds, right? Walker Kessler, more or less than 2 blocks. And if you just get 2 players right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. So here's the deal. Sign up today. You get $50 instantly when you just play $5. So download the Prize Picks app, use the promo code ESPN700, and you will get $50 instantly when you just play $5. You do not even need to win your bet. You just get that free $50. You might as well get their free money and see if you like it, as I say every single day. All right, from basketball to hockey. Coming up on the other side, Neil Smith joins us. Can move over to Andy Larson and Tim McMahon. Lot to do on a Thursday drive. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. After a very busy night last night in the world of college and pro basketball locally, kind of quiet tonight, but we do have a hockey game, and it is a big one. Bill Armstrong joined the program this week and essentially said we've got 23 game sevens left to try to qualify for the postseason. The stretch run is on. Our next guest joins us on a weekly basis to educate us on the world of pro hockey. Neil Smith on a Thursday afternoon. Neil, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Spence. How's things out there?
Things are good. Things are good. This little hockey club is making some noise. And by the way, I buried the lead. You should know that Bill Armstrong just had the kindest things to say about you when he joined us this week. When I told him that you stop by on a weekly basis, he was very effusive with his praise and said he looked up to you quite a bit when you were doing your thing back in the day. I thought you'd like to know that.
Well, that's very kind of him. I'm not sure if we've met personally, or everybody in hockey knows each other in some way, shape, or form. But no, I admire the job that he's done with Arizona and now with Utah. So it's nice. It's always nice to hear something nicely said about you, isn't it?
For sure, for sure. And this club, as of late, we've got 5-2 in the last 7, 3-1 in the last 4. And Neil, I'll give you the credit, man. They're right where you said they would be. But, as you've kind of watched them and studied them, what do you think has clicked as of late that's allowed them to kind of run off this 5 wins and 7 game stretch? Or is it just kind of getting healthy and kind of, just gelling at the right time?
Well, the one thing that I think with this team is that they've gotten, as they've gotten older as the season's gone on, as we all have, but as they've matured as a team, they're a lot more disciplined than they were at the beginning of the season. Do you remember how we talked about earlier in the year about they were taking undisciplined penalties and they were blowing leads and things like this? What I think now is that they're a much more disciplined team coming down the stretch. And that's a credit to the coach, and the coaching staff that's gotten them to that point where we know they're a young team, but they're staying more disciplined, I think, than they were earlier.
So Bill was very honest when I asked him about the trade deadline, which is just about a week away. And he essentially said that, yes, there are deals out there that he's having discussions about, and we don't know if they're going to do anything. One thing that he certainly said that stood out to me is they will not be in the market for a rental, right? So meaning,
right,
even though they're close to the wild card, they're not going to sacrifice this long-term plan in the name of bringing in a player just to get them into the wild card this year. But as a guy that's been in the rooms where it happens, right, tell us kind of what you believe the conversations are right now with Utah Hockey Club as they weigh out the pros and cons of either making a move or standing pat.
I think probably the GMs are calling Bill and saying, what are you going to do? Are you going to trade some of your older guys or one of your older guys and build up some chips for later down the road? Or are you going to be looking to do nothing and just stay pat and see what happens? Or are you going to I would doubt very much that Bill would want to bring in a player at this point. That would be silly, because even if you can make the playoffs and last one round and you've lost a draft pick or a young player, it's just not worth it. So yeah, I would say that there's calls coming in for his guys, for his guys as unrestricted at the end of the year.
We've talked quite a bit about the goalie situation because I do find it pretty interesting where Connor Ingram was the dude last year, the first-choice goalie last year, and then started the season as the first-choice goalie. Didn't work out great, and then he got hurt. And I think I read that Vejmelka has now started 3 straight games. That's the first time that either of the two have had 3 straight starts ever since they went to the back-and-forth dynamic. Does it feel like Vejmelka is kind of locked in that first-choice goalie spot at this point?
I think so. That's what I think that he has. And it's credit to him. And unfortunately, he has played really well, and his partner there, Connor Ingram, who was slated to be number 1, as you said, hasn't played as well. So now you've got a situation where I think that Vejmelka is the go-to guy from my vantage point.
All right. before we get to tonight, because Minnesota's in town and that's a good team, I want to do a little exercise here where we find ourselves with the Utah Hockey Club on 61 points, 3 points shy of Calgary, 4 points shy of Vancouver, 9 shy of Colorado, only 1 ahead of St. Louis. So I want to talk about the teams that they're kind of existing with right now in this ecosystem and whether or not you think that, the Utah Hockey Club can rise up and maybe get enough points to pass them. But let's start with a team that's right behind them. 1 point behind Utah is St. Louis, and they've just kind of been okay all year. And you look at the home record, the road record, the last 10, and if you stretch it back even to the last 20, it's about a 500 club. But they're on Utah Hockey Club's heels. Is this a team you think the Hockey Club needs to be concerned about when it comes to the wild card race?
I think they got to be concerned about everybody, but they got to concentrate mostly on just winning their own games and not watching the scoreboard, the out-of-town scoreboard, because if you start doing that, you'll throw you off of what you're doing from day to day. I think St. Louis is a team that I don't see making it, and I know that their plan is Doug Armstrong. His plan is to have a really good team in a couple of years from now, so he's not going to do anything to try to bolster his team to get into the playoffs this year. He's going to be just like Bill Armstrong. I think that he's going to ride it out, and if they're not able to make it, well, they're closer to being what they want to be than they were a year ago. So I don't think that they're a team. I don't want to say they're a team you don't worry about. You got to worry about everybody, but it'll take a winning streak and a little bit of a collapse for Utah to get in. And what I mean by a little bit of a collapse, if Calgary's winning right now, Vancouver's, sort of win one, lose one type thing, one of those two teams has got to sort of start to fall. And at the same time, Utah's got to win their games, especially their games against Vancouver, Calgary, St. Louis, Anaheim, those teams that are clumped in there with them trying to get into those wild card positions.
Of the two, I'll ask the question this way. So Calgary has a 3-point lead on Utah Hockey Club, but they also have 2 games in hand. They played 57 games. Utah has played 59. Vancouver has a 4-point lead with 1 game in hand. They've played 58. Utah's played 59. Of those two, Vancouver or Calgary, who do you think is more likely to kind of fall for the hockey club to take advantage of?
I think I would say Calgary. They weren't even thought of to be. They were thought of to be in a total rebuild this year, but they started off the year really well, and they've done what they've accomplished this year is really good. Vancouver is an anomaly because they won their division last year. They were supposed to be again really better this year. They've had some internal problems. They ended up trading JT Miller away to solve their locker room problems. It could be either one. Quinn Hughes' health is in question. He's their best defenseman, maybe their best player. Norris Trophy last season. He just came back into the lineup yesterday. They had a big win after being down 2-0. They beat Los Angeles Kings in overtime. So that's big for them. Anytime you can get those 2 points and not just get one, you're better off. Let me mention one other thing, is that when Utah plays these teams like Calgary, like Vancouver, like St. Louis, they got to make sure they win in regulation and not let that team even get a point, because it's a slow slog if teams around you are always getting a point in every game. You want to make it so that they don't get anything and you get 2. And I know that's hard to do, but that should be the goal.
I'll ask you about 2 more teams kind of in this area, because both the Avs and the Kings are on 70. Now, that's a tough ask, because that's a 9-point gap with about 22, 23 games left, depending on who we're talking about. But give me your thoughts on where we find ourselves with the Avalanche and the Kings, and do you think either of those two might come back down to earth a little bit for any of the teams behind them to catch them in either the wild card or in the divisional race?
My honest opinion is that the top 7 are locked in.
Okay.
And that Colorado they're just a couple of years from a Stanley Cup. LA Kings have had a real good season. I don't see them slowing down. I really don't see anybody coming back in this mix. Even Minnesota Wild, who I know is there tonight in Utah. The only thing I can say is that Utah's got to jump over Calgary and Vancouver. Those are the two that you mentioned, and you're right on. They got to jump over those two. The one good thing, by the way, is the home record is getting better. They won their what was it? They won their last home games, which was really good. Where was I had that up there? But anyway, didn't they just win? Their last two home games.
They've won three straight. If we go back to the Flyers game, they've won three straight. Yeah,
right, which is great because you need to get that home record better. Not to say that you can afford to lose on the road. You can't. It was a huge win against Washington. I listened to that game. That was on Super Bowl Sunday. They played Washington. They ended up winning in a shootout. They should have won during regulation, but the Caps are a great team. But that was a big win and a big shot of confidence for those young guys to beat the best team in the league. Winnipeg and Washington, as we've talked about. Best in the East is Washington. Best in the West is Winnipeg. That was big, and they didn't embarrass themselves in LA either. The following Saturday, they played pretty well, and they've won two games that they had to win. They beat Vancouver, they beat Chicago. If they can win tonight, it's great. They just got to keep it going. And Minnesota's banged up, so this may be an opportunity.
So that's where I wanted to go next. You referenced Minnesota coming in with some injuries. They're on 72 points. And as you referenced, and you're probably right, if you just do simple math, it feels like the top seven locked in. But tell us about this Wild team. What is the Utah Hockey Club up against tonight?
Well, they're a very good defensive team, and they can shut you down. And they've got some great offensive weapons, but they have had injuries. And Kaprizov is injured. He's not. He hasn't been playing for a while now, and he was an MVP candidate. So that's a tough break for Minnesota, who's so good defensively, and then had that sniper as well to use in the games, and was really playing well this season. Minnesota, as I said, is they're well coached. They can shut you down. Now it's going to be hard because Utah's a pretty good scoring team. They've got a lot of weapons at their disposal. But as I said, they got Kaprizov is out, and Joel Eriksson Ek is also out, and Ryan Hartman is suspended from something he did a couple of weeks ago. So, you know what? Utah's got an opportunity here, and they got to take advantage of it.
All right, so let's just talk big picture now, trade deadline stuff. On January the 31st, the league and the NHLPA announced an agreement to create what's called increased predictability. I've never heard that before, about the salary cap over the next 3 seasons. They're looking for a new collective bargaining agreement, which expires after 25-26. So the cap's going up. I don't know how much of this has to do with the recent buzz created by Four Nations, but 95.5 next year, then it's 104, and then 113.5. These are predictions, not set in stone. So do you think the new numbers are going to motivate, executives, guys that did the job you did once upon a time, to make more moves prior to the March 7th deadline? And if so, which teams and players do you think could be involved?
I don't know that predicting the cap going up is going to impact the trade deadline. I think that's going to impact the free agency that they in the summer, when they depend upon the cap going up, so they can give a longer-term deal or a deal with more money in it than perhaps is reasonable if the cap doesn't go up. But I would say for Utah, I would look at these guys to perhaps be moved because they're unrestricted, and that's Alex Kerfoot, Nick Bukestad, who's been around a while. He's 32, but he would be a good centerman on any playoff team. Carcone is maybe a fourth line center. He's a total free agent. And then a couple of guys that have been around a while, Ian Cole, who's also won a Stanley Cup, and Ole Mata. Both of these guys are free agents. So what's going to happen is Bill Armstrong's going to say at the trade deadline, if I can get something for Cole or Mata or Bukestad or somebody else, that I got to do it, because I may get nothing for them if they walk away in the summer. So if he doesn't feel that he can sign, for example, Kerfoot, he doesn't feel that's going the right way, you might see him move Kerfoot to get something so that he doesn't lose him for nothing when the summer comes.
So as far as the teams you would consider like fringe contenders, and I've got the odds up, the current odds to win the Stanley Cup. And when it comes to teams that are like right on the outside looking in, looks like at this point, Edmonton is your favorite. Carolina is right behind them. Then it's the Panthers, the Stars, the Capitals, and the Jets in that order. So when you look at the group, like among the favorites or fringe favorites, who do you think potentially could make a deal? And are there big names out there available to be had?
I think you'll see Florida do something going into the playoffs because they're primed to try to win it again, and they certainly do have that opportunity. I think Vegas is always they're always making deals, and they seem to be making the right ones at the right times. Kevin Cheveldayoff is a conservative guy in Winnipeg, the general manager, and he's sitting pretty right now. I don't know how much he'll want to change. He might want to just fortify what he's already got. And Washington, Dallas has already done their job when they made the trade with San Jose to get Granlund and to get Ceci, the defenseman. So they're fortified right now. But anything is possible. That guys could still make moves just to give themselves some fortification going forward. Don't count Carolina out either of making another deal, even though they made the biggest deal in a couple of years they've already made during the season. Carolina's always going for it, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them do something.
Tell me, let's do a couple more big picture things before I set you loose. Give me the most surprising team, the Neil Smith most surprising team in the NHL this year, and the most disappointing team in pro hockey this year.
I think that's an easy question. I got to tell you, the Washington Capitals have gone from getting into the playoffs by the skin of their teeth last year and then losing 4 straight to the Rangers in the first round to now being, right up there, as we've talked about with Winnipeg, in a chance to win the President's Trophy as first of the 32 teams. So that team has been absolutely amazing, the turnaround that they've done from last year to this year. And coming in second, of course, is Winnipeg because they've had a tremendous year. But they're not as unexpected as Washington. On the other end of the scale is the Nashville Predators, who everybody thought had fortified their team. They spent a ton of money in the summer. They got people like Steven Stamkos and Brady Shea and Marchessault and they have fallen on their face, and they're not going to make the playoffs. They're just a huge disappointment as far as what the experts would have expected that they were going to do after the summer they had.
We oftentimes talk about, and I started the show off with this today, we have a situation currently with our basketball team where they're not trying to win, and they're not alone. About a third of the NBA every single year, Neil, as a result of just the structure of the league and how it's built and, the ability to find talent via the draft, about a third of the teams in pro basketball, when you look at kind of the landscape of the league, roughly a third of the teams just not even trying to win and not even, hiding it, quite frankly. Nobody comes out and says we're tanking. Nobody comes out and says we're trying to lose. Instead, they say things like we're leaning into development and we're playing young players. Is that as commonplace in pro hockey? Like when there's a elite prospect available in the draft, do you see a good portion of the league? Because NHL players are wired different than NBA players. And we've talked about it a bunch after the Four Nations stuff. But is that a thing in hockey the way it is in basketball, where teams try to position themselves to lose on purpose to draft a high-level prospect?
Well, that doesn't go by individual game in the NHL for sure, because you can't control the players. The players are always going to try to win. The coach is always going to try to win. That's inbred into them, and you wouldn't want players that didn't have that in them. But organizations will start to do things like San Jose this year traded Michael Granlund and Cody Ceci, as I said, to Dallas. Those are 2 of their top players. Well, they're doing that for their future, and they're down in the bottom of the league, and they're happy to be down in the bottom of the league as a management, as an executive level, because they want to build up towards something very special down the road. Chicago is sort of in the same boat. Those two teams, I would say, are the two that really they're not trying to lose, but their game plan was tear it down and then build it back up with young players through the draft. But in the NHL, I'd say they're the only two this year that you can point to. Anaheim is down there a little bit, but they've been respectable. But you've got some other teams. I should have mentioned, by the way, the Pittsburgh Penguins, to put them in with Nashville as the most disappointing team in the league. Here's a team that has Sidney Crosby, Malkin, Letang, and Erik Karlsson, 4 future Hall of Famers. You can bet on that. They're all going into the Hall of Fame. And yet Pittsburgh's in last in the Eastern Conference and just had some horrible performances this season. So they're another big disappointment in the league. But as far as your question about tanking or not trying to win, that doesn't go on a night-to-night basis. But it can be the game plan of the management, as you said, to play young players, trade away their veteran players. You're not going to win a lot of games if you don't have guys that have been around for a while. So that does happen in the league, but not a lot of teams. So not like you're talking about.
If I asked you to pick right now your favorite to come out of both conferences, the East and the West.
I'm still going to lean. I'm going to lean with Florida. Still, I just think they're such a playoff team, and I think Winnipeg. And I know it's crazy maybe because Winnipeg's never been in the final. But boy, I watched them again last night, and they are really, really good. You and I have talked about it many times. They're a great team. So I'll just call those two, Florida and Winnipeg.
Yeah, I mean, they've won 11 straight. Their differential's plus 73. I mean, that's got to mean something. It's wild, Neil.
It does. It does. The problem is that they went out in the first round last year to Colorado, and so now everybody's going, well, that's great. You're having a great regular season, but let's see what you can do when the playoffs come. You know, they've got that sort of hanging around their neck right now. So we'll see. I hope for them, for Scott Arniel, the coach has done a great job, and the Mark Scheifele and his crew there that they are able to do something. And they got the best goalie in the world, and Connor Hellebuck, the U.S. goalie in the Four Nations, and I hope for their sake they're able to really put together a good playoff run.
Where can our new hockey fans in the market go find that good podcast of yours, Neil?
It's called NHL Wraparound, and it's called Wraparound because we wrap around the entire league and talk about all the teams in the league and what's going on and player injuries, player movements, anything NHL we're talking about, plus a little bit of history built into it. But get it on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you go to get a podcast, you can find it there. Give us a chance. Give us a subscribe, if you will. And you know what? We're going to keep going with it. We're having a lot of fun, and hopefully a lot of people are having fun listening to it.
Neil, thank you for the time, sir. I appreciate it. Have a great week and weekend, and we'll chat soon.
I look forward to talking to you next week.
All right. The great Neil Smith, general manager for the New York Rangers in 1994 when they lifted Lord Stanley's Cup. He was a high-level scout for the Red Wings, and I always appreciate his time on this Thursday afternoon. All right, time now for your PGA Tour leaderboard update, brought to you by our friends at Uinta Golf. Check them out online at worldwidegolfshops.com. Located at 560 East, 2100 South. Randy got me a new putter at Uinta last week. They're also in Sandy, Riverdale, and Orem. This update is brought to you by Titleist. The new Pro V1 and new Pro V1X brings you more speed and control than ever. Now available at Uinta Golf Shops by Worldwide Golf. We got the Cognizant Classic in the Palm Beaches. It's the start of the Florida Swing on the PGA Tour, and Jake Knapp went low. How about a round 159 for Jake Knapp? He's your leader in the clubhouse at 12 under par. Daniel Berger, Russell Henley, and Sami Välimäki are at 8 under par. Then it's Sam Ryder, Ricky Fowler, Davis Riley, Jesper Svensson, and Keith Mitchell at 6 under par. A lot of big names on the leaderboard. Michael Kim, Jordan Spieth, Brian Harmon, Charlie Hoffman, and J.J. Spahn at 6 under par as well. Couple notables, Zach Johnson at 5 under, as is Billy Horschel. And we scroll down a little bit. Shane Lowry is 5 under par. Denny McCarthy is 400 par. This is a big-time leaderboard. A lot of big names up on the top. So it is the start of the Florida swing for the PGA Tour, and they are at the Palm Beaches at the Cognizant Classic right now, the PGA National Resort and Spa. It's the champion course in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. All right, 1 hour down, 3 hours to go. Coming up on the other side, we'll do a little jazz and some RSL with Andy Larson. We have Tim McMahon later on. Then we'll do a little sports court. Busy Thursday show on a beautiful Thursday afternoon. Keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. I got Ben McMahon on the show today. Tim McMahon will stop by later on. Busy night of basketball, both in the pros and in college last night locally. Quiet tonight, but the hockey club is in action. Let's welcome in our guy from the Salt Lake Tribune, do a little jazz, and we'll do a little RSL. Tears falling down the cheek. Andy Larson on a Thursday. Andy, happy Thursday, buddy. How we doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. So we all know what time it is for the Jazz. We all know the deal, okay? But when cool things happen, let's go ahead and lean into cool things when they happen. And let's lean into what happened last night with Walker Kessler. And, it's not just the numbers. It's not just the history. I mean, historically speaking, that is a very special stat line. It's also, Andy, that he did it against Domas Sabonis, right? Like Sabonis, excuse me. Like, Sabonis has eaten the Jazz up, and he's a really, really good player. And so the Jazz lost, which you and I have talked about. Let's go, on board. But when cool things happen, let's talk about the cool thing. And what happened with Walker last night was a cool thing, yes?
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think what's really great about Walker as an offensive player right now is that he's taking advantage of what the defense gives him. And, we've seen there have been a couple matchups, and I think most of teams against the Jazz this year are kind of protecting the paint most of all because most of the Jazz's shooters aren't efficient ones. But Walker, the Kings protected the perimeter and allowed Walker to get dunks and layups inside. And so, yeah, to go to, a perfect 100%, go 10 for 10, do something that only two guys in NBA history have done, Nikola Jokic and Wilt Chamberlain before, is pretty cool. And look, he's not Wilt, he's not Jokic, but he is a really, useful and good player that I think is a real building block for this Jazz team. And maybe one of the only building blocks for this Jazz team is, like, again, they look to put together their next good contending team. I think to have someone who brings the level of rim protection that he does and, is a responsible offensive player at that center spot, certainly not wildly talented, but is adding more than he takes away, I think is a great thing. So, props to Walker for kind of figuring out how to get better after that, rough second season and do what he's done this year because it's been really good.
Let's stay in the space, and your answer to this question might include a portion of how you just answered my original question, but if we remove the in a vacuum against the Kings and pan back to all year long with Walker Kessler, 45 games played, 45 starts, and the numbers, it's about 12 points, it's about 12 boards, it's over 2 blocks. What growth have you seen specifically, not just against the Kings last night, but all year long from Walker? Is it more of a approach off the court? Is it adding strength? Is it just growing as an NBA player? What do you attribute this growth to year 3 for Walker Kessler?
Yeah, I think mentally, honestly, it was big for him. I mean, there were a lot of people who were really kind of down on him mentally, even within the organization last year, right? Like, just found that whenever something would go wrong for Walker, that would compound itself into not only kind of the next play, but the next quarter, the next half, the next game, and kind of things spiraled a little bit, right? And I think the rough Team USA performance led to a bad season. And I give him a lot of credit for working on that game mentally and where if he has a bad first half against the Lakers like he did 3 weeks ago, then he comes back with a really good second half. And that's been really, really different than what he did last year. I think the strength is kind of the biggest physical and on-court thing that you can actually see, where he just is getting, again, where last year loose balls were kind of 50-50, where, he kind of tip them and honestly lose them in a lot of cases. He's ending up using his size and strength to really protect that ball and to get more of those rebounds. He is the leading offensive rebounder in the NBA from an offensive rebounding percentage point of view, right? Like, for him to be number 1 in the league in that category on a bad team, and in a way that where he's tasked with a lot from an offensive rebounding responsibility point of view, like I think is really, really impressive. So, yeah, tremendous season from him. I think you can make a legitimate case he's been the best Jazz player this year. I'm not sure that I would totally go that direction, but there certainly is that case, and he Again, I think he's a building block, and you have to be impressed with kind of how he rebounded from that really pretty iffy year too.
So I've had a couple of guests on, including McMahon, who's going to join us later, and then I think it was Zach Harper this week, that have basically echoed my sentiment, which once upon a time it felt like there was a lot to like about KJ Martin. And look, man, I'm not trying to stretch here to make a topic that's not a topic, but based off of some of the underwhelming performances / injuries of some of the younger Jazz players, it feels like KJ Martin is a player that is worth taking a long look at to not just keep around at the end of the season, but maybe hold on to through the next, at the end of next year, because he is under contract. And at times, I feel like as I've watched him as he's grown throughout the course of his career, there are some things that feel like they're real. So he got the start last night, put 34 minutes in, had 16 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, knocked down a couple of threes. What do you think about this young player? And maybe is he somebody that we should talk about, that they're talking about as part of the future?
Yeah, I mean, he's 24, right? So, like, he is in a different kind of age class than the rookies and sophomores. And I think you see that in kind of the maturity of his game a little bit, right? Like, he chased Zach LaVine around screens, or DeMar DeRozan around screens yesterday in a way that none of the rookies and sophomores are capable of. But they're also 20 and 21 years old compared to 24, right? And so I'm kind of curious to see, like, kind of how their body changes. KJ is probably the most athletic Jazz player right now. I mean, it's probably between him and maybe John Collins, but John has lost a lot of athleticism. And then I think that, frankly, just like he does play harder than I think the rookies and sophomores do right now. So I think there's some growth for them in that spot. At $8 million a year, I'm interested. You can kind of go either way on his contract, right? Like, I think that's not a ton. I don't think that's like a crazy contract for him. The shooting continues to be the actual worry of, like, hey, can he be a legitimate role player, or is he just like a connector, right? But if you have something else to do with that $8 million, if you can use it to trade for a bad contract and get a first-round pick in return, I'd probably go that direction personally. But, like, I don't think KJ is nothing either, right? Like, I think that he can be a role player on a decent team. So, I think it's a good thing that the Jazz have kind of acquired this really flexible contract and can kind of see how he develops over the last 24 games. But yeah, I think I do kind of put KJ in kind of the just a guy category, because he has been moved around so much, because the numbers haven't been great, and because, again, it's just hard to play around a guy who's struggles with shooting the ball when you do get the good players. But again, like, I don't think like he's overpaid, and I do think like there's he can be a kind of a connector if you do get other good players around him.
So let's do the latest on your thoughts. We haven't done this in a while, but let's just kind of talk about where we find ourselves with the young players, the growth, and your current assessment on what you think they can be as we move forward, and whether or not you think they're around when the Jazz are serious about winning again. Excuse me. And the latest player that I'll ask you about is Kyle Filipowski, who prior to last night, and look, Walker came back last night, so he had 14 minutes, but prior to last night was getting some starts, was getting some minutes, and he was putting up some real nice numbers. And I think his game against the Blazers may have been one of, if not his best game as a pro. So what's your current assessment of where we find ourselves with Kyle Filipowski?
Yeah, he's useful. I mean, like, his ability to be 7 foot and play center and can kind of hang on the glass. He struggled last night on interior defense against Sabonis and Jonas Valanciunas, which makes sense because those guys are just a lot stronger and thicker than he is. But he can be on the perimeter and do a lot of, like we said when he was drafted, a lot of Kelly Olynyk stuff, right? Like, where he can hit threes from outside, where he can create offense, where you can kind of use him as an offensive hub up at the top of the key, and then have a lot of off-ball stuff going, some split action, which Will Hardy loves. Like, if there's a trademark of a Will Hardy offense, it's kind of the off-ball split action stuff. And Kyle can deliver those passes on time and on target and make great reads. And I think that's a really, really useful thing in today's NBA. I mean, you see like what Al Horford does for the Boston Celtics offense. It is an incredibly useful thing to have a big man who can kind of create on off-ball stuff. I mean, Draymond with the Warriors does a lot of that same stuff too, right? Like, I think there's kind of the Al Horford kind of upside with him, and then I think there's also a lot of games where he disappears and isn't useful, and is overmatched a little bit. And so, like, I think there's like some Frank Kaminsky downside where, like, in the end, he's probably right now too thin to hang on the defensive end. So we'll see what happens with him. But I gotta say, like, a player that you can like really kind of plug in as someone you has an identifiable role on the offensive end is really something that a lot of the other young Jazz players don't have, and it kind of leads me to believe that he's going to have I feel pretty optimistic about him having a good NBA career.
We'll kind of just go down the list here. I feel like Keontae, once the sting of going to the bench kind of wore off, and then the pressure of having to be an initiator when I don't think that's who he is, I think we've seen more good than bad. Defensively, it's just going to be a process, and you and I have discussed it, but the numbers as of late have been better, and the splits have been a little bit better. Are we seeing Keontae improve in his new role a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's taking advantage of lower quality defenses coming off the bench. I mean, you look at like kind of what's changing, not a ton, like the minutes are exactly the same, the points are exactly the same, but he's a little bit more efficient because he's getting to the line more often. And that makes sense, right? Like if you're playing bigger, smarter defenders, they aren't going to, go for your foul drawing stuff compared to the bench guys, right? And I think we've seen that with Keontae, and he's put up some good performances. He's also put up some really bad performances. I still have some questions on essentially like if he's not a point guard, then it becomes tough because he is relatively small for a two guard. He's not a defender, and he's not all that efficient. So like, yeah, like kind of he does have to be a sixth man a little bit, right? Like in kind of the Jordan Clarkson mold. Problem is like Jordan is a better defender than Keontae right now, and so you hope that Keontae can develop at least to become a Jordan Clarkson defender, which is not a good one, but a passable one. I think he shows, again, a lot of kind of that same Jordan Clarkson, like can catch on fire on stuff. And obviously at a certain point, points are the name of the game, and that's great. He's got to tune the efficiency to be up 4 or 5% across the board. And then all of a sudden he becomes a really viable player. As is, it just is going to need improvement because it does get, it's so up and down from night to night.
Can he become a Jordan Clarkson level defender is a sentence I never thought I'd hear anybody say, Andy.
Jordan's a little underrated defensively. Like, I think he is a 3 out of 10 defender where people think he's a 1 out of 10 defender. Maybe even, I would even put Jordan Clarkson a 4 out of 10 defender.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. High praise. But, I mean, Keontae is a 1 out of 10 defender right now.
Right.
I think moving to the bench, maybe he's been a 2 out of 10. It does need to jump a couple levels.
All right. I haven't asked you about Bryce Sensabaugh in a while, and he went. He had a rough stretch there. I think I saw on the broadcast at one point he was like 2 of his last 25 from 3 or something. And I don't know. Like I've always thought, maybe when it's fully baked, he could have like this little Dennis Scott role in the league. And there are some nights where he's knocking down shots and it looks good, and other nights where he just looks completely lost. And you're expecting that from a player certainly who is young at 21 years old. But what's the latest Andy Larson take on the progress or lack thereof of Bryce Sensabaugh?
Yeah, I mean, he's got a thinner and stronger body than he used to, which means he doesn't look as tired as he did in his rookie season, which is a good thing. He's still not making an impact on the defensive end. He's a better passer and rebounder probably than he gets credit for. And then, again, like it does for so many NBA players, especially role players, especially, 2s and 3s, it's about whether or not he can shoot. And if he makes 38% of his threes, he's a useful player. And if he makes 32% of his threes, he's not. And I mean, that's where we are in the NBA when 50% of the shots are threes and so much of your job is providing spacing for the stars. It's hard for me to imagine, like, him finding a role if he's not able to kind of consistently keep those shooting percentages high. That being said, like, I kind of believe in his shot more than any of the other young players. Like, he showed an ability to shoot in college. He shows an ability to shoot in practice and warm-ups at a really high level. I kind of believe in him as a 38% shooter, and so then, like, okay, then all of a sudden it makes sense as a 8th, 9th, 10th guy off the bench who can kind of hang around. But, it actually has to be that way in NBA games, and him avoiding those shooting slumps as long as possible is huge for his career.
I go back and forth with Isaiah Collier. I do think there's a lot to like. And more than anything else, I just didn't expect him to grab the starting job and get minutes. So it's been I'll call it a pleasant surprise. It's the same stuff, though, that you and I have talked about. For all the assist numbers, there are, and he was clean last night, no turnovers last night. But if we expand back, there are 3 or 4 possessions every game. I'm like, what exactly did you see there when you decided to make that pass? And then it's the shooting stuff. It's nothing new. I mean, you cannot be a lead guard or a guard period, a wing period, or maybe even a player period in the modern day and age NBA if you're going to be a 25% three-point shooter. But your latest take on the progress of Isaiah and how he's responded to getting the nod as the starting lead guard.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give him this. He has made this season much more watchable than it was
For sure.
when he wasn't playing, right?
For sure, yeah.
To have a Jazz player who is not looking for his own shot, but looking up to set up others, who is looking to push the pace, who is looking to and is capable of making kind of highlight reel passes and setting up, it's just so much better to watch than it was earlier in the season. So, infinite props, and we'll always remember Isaiah Collier for at least that. And then, it becomes, okay, if teams actually do start to scout the Jazz, are they going to hang 10 feet off of Isaiah? And I think at this point they would. And then, so next year, can he become a 30 to 32% three-point shooter rather than just a 25% one? You mentioned the turnovers. Like, the turnovers have to improve. I honestly think, like, over the last month and a half, the turnovers have been largely fine. So that's been really impressive to see as a starting point guard. I believe in him to be a setup man in the NBA as that. It's just like, if you want to play in the playoffs, then you have to be able to shoot. And we'll see how that goes. But I think there's a lot of other stuff to like. I think you have to like kind of his demeanor about how he's attacked this rookie year, despite being the number 1 overall recruit, to be as kind of selfless as he has been is really impressive. There is a lot of good stuff there. And so I'm kind of inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt on the shooting, or at least give him the chance to see what he can do, because the other stuff in his game has been really good.
I will ask you about Taylor, but only what you're hearing, Taylor Hendricks, about the recovery and how he's attacked it. It's impossible to analyze his game because he hasn't played in forever and he's hurt. But what are you hearing about the progress off the floor that Taylor Hendricks is making in his recovery?
Yeah, I talked to Justin Zanuck actually about him today at Jazz practice. Sounds like he is really attacking the weight room and growing his body in a significant way. So I believe before the season, or maybe last season, I think he was at 217 pounds. And then I heard today that he was at 245 or thereabouts. So, that's a significant gain. And, I think maybe some of that's because he hasn't playing. But from what I hear, it's because he's changed his body and become much more muscular. I mean, I think we saw that even in the first 3 games he had gained, I think he said 17 pounds. And so now we're up to 27, 28 or so. Like, that's a big jump. And I think that kind of weight gain, that strength is really good for him. But yeah, then the rest of the game is a question mark, right? Like, so I think I feel pretty good about him being a good NBA defender, from what I saw early in the season. Like, I feel good about him being we're using that 1 to 10 scale, a 7 or 8 out of 10 NBA defender. And maybe he can get even better than that. The offense has to come along, right? Like, he's either got to be able to shoot the ball really well at that point, or do a little bit more off the dribble to take advantage of closeouts and things like that. So we'll see how that happens. He hasn't been able to practice any of that. He just barely got out of the walking boot. But, we'll see. He's probably not going to play in Summer League. It's going to be a waiting process. And then obviously I think there's going to be kind of a recovery, knocking off the rust process at the beginning of next year of year 3. It does remind me a little bit of the Dante Exum situation a decade ago.
So just out of respect, I will ask you about Juzang and Svi. They do not have any guaranteed money. So technically, their contracts do go through next year and even beyond that, but no guaranteed money. Do you think either of those two are around for more than another year, or even if that?
I mean, I don't see any reason why you would necessarily keep them. I mean, Johnny, I think you would probably, I don't know. Johnny's younger, and you may keep over Svi as just again, maybe you can convince some team of his upside. Svi is an okay role player, but is getting DMP CDs on this team when they have 4 regular starters out. My personal preference would be probably to rotate through other end of the bench NBA guys and see if you can get someone who pops more than those two guys have.
All right, final one. I'll ask you about Cody. I mean, look, he's 20, so I don't know that it's fair just to completely dismiss. But man, Andy, just waiting for something for these fans to latch on to indicate that a pick that you made in the top 10 might pay dividends at some point. Like I said, I'm not trying to be overly critical. I'm not trying to say he's never going to evolve in anything because he's a kid. But at this point, is there anything that has excited you about the play of Cody Williams this year?
He had 2 good games after the All-Star break and again, good in an extremely low expectation zone, but where he attacked the basket a little bit more and then was good defensively, where he stayed in front defensively and forced his matchup to pass the ball. And he's so far away from a body point of view. He's so far away from a skill level point of view, right? He is shooting 12% from 10 feet to the 3-point line this year. 12%. To make 12% of your shots as an NBA player in any zone is insane, right? It's been really bad. I think the lack of kind of star flashes, I think, is really concerning, right? He just has not shown even kind of the high end of things. And so to me right now, my kind of hope is, okay, if you develop from a body point of view, then it all of a sudden kind of makes sense where you can defend and maybe you develop the shot as well, and you can be a kind of a 3-and-D guy, kind of a connector guy. I think he is a smart player. I think he makes the right read most of the time. I think he's in the right place on defense most of the time. He just doesn't do anything with it. And I think a lot of that might be the body, but I think a lot of that might be who he is as a player a little bit. And so, yeah, I'm certainly definitely worried about Cody. You don't want to write him off after year 1. He is still young. Again, he's so skinny. But, if you had the 10th pick back at this point, you probably would like to make a different selection.
All right, before we get to RSL, and we do need to get your thoughts on the lads. It has not been great. I have your Twitter pulled up, and there is a report from Mike Florio, Pro Football Talk, that Jordan Schultz of Fox Sports verbally accosted Ian Rappaport of the NFL media at Indianapolis, ironically enough at a Starbucks, and Jordan's dad owns Starbucks, at least he used to. And you quote, and you say, I've been witness to a few reporter-on-reporter yelling matches during my career, and I'll tell you what, every single one of them has been extremely funny. Because of that tweet, I've been scratching my brain a little bit to try to figure out what you're talking about and if any of that has happened locally. Do you have any good stories that you can share on air about any of this stuff?
Some of them have happened locally. I am going to, you can guess, certainly the members involved in some of the local ones. I will send you even video of one of them.
Oh, hell yes.
And I will decline comment further for a public audience.
What? Andy, did any of these happen out in public, or was this in the media room type thing?
I'm trying to think. I don't think I've seen any screaming, yelling no, that one happened on a street. Walking from the Delta Center back to the Tribune office. That's the greatest detail I'll give. Again, and I'm happy to send you a video of more.
Do any of them involve Gordon?
No, actually.
Oh, okay.
Gordon got in a disagreement with our guy Eric Walden once, but I wouldn't even call it a verbal altercation, a yelling, or it was a back in the day. Eric Walden used to be Gordon's editor at the Trib, and they got into a disagreement over a column. But even that wasn't a yelling match. That was, of reporter disagreements that I'm tweeting about. That certainly wasn't one of them. That was definitely pretty tame.
Do any of them involve me?
No.
Okay, good.
I don't think. Have you yelled at another reporter before?
That's none of your business, Andy. Do any of them involve you?
I'll say this. I don't think I've ever yelled at another reporter before, but I have gotten into a disagreement at one point. So I slammed my beverage down in the Jazz press room, and it's kind of spilled over the top, and then got all over Tony, and so I feel bad about that. Is
there one member of the local media you would like to verbally accost?
Ooh. That's a good question.
You know the answer is yes. I know the answer is yes.
Right now, sun's shining. I'm in a great place mentally.
Okay.
I'm great right now.
Okay. Well, let's ruin your great place mentally and talk about our local soccer club.
Thank you.
Look, man, it's a very fair point to make that, and I've seen some people make this point, they raised season ticket prices this year, and they sold off half their team, and they got rid of half their team, and they got rid of most of their great attacking players. And Elias or Elias Manuel, however you pronounce his name, maybe he was going to be the guy to step in and make a little bit of a difference. Trey compared him to a young Anderson Julio. That's not going to move the needle. So it's very fair at this point to look over and say, what are you doing? We got 1 goal through 3 games, and they lose to Herediano in CONCACAF Champions round 1 after making the tournament for the first time in a decade. And look, it is a really fun tournament if you could advance. I remember that team in 2010 nearly winning the whole thing. So I'll just ask you for your take, the Andy Larson take, 3 games in, 2 CONCACAF, 1 MLS, on where we stand with RSL and what you think needs to happen next.
I don't get how you acquire Elias Manuel and don't ask him if he wants to play for RSL.
Yeah.
That's bad management, right? If you're not asking that guy, if before you make that trade, that if he's willing to play for RSL, again, that's just a step you have to check off the list, right? You got to talk to his agent, man. And maybe they did. I don't know what exactly happened there, but from what has been said publicly and frankly privately, it sounds like he, wanted to play in New York, but didn't want to play in Salt Lake, which I understand as a young Brazilian human being, but you got to find that out first before you trade assets for him. Come on now. And then, look, the bigger issue is you sold Gomez for $11 million. You sold Fidel Barajas for $4 million. You sold Chicho for $1.5 in GAM, which is worth more than that in cash in kind of the MLS trade world. And you've bought a $3 million player and a $1.5 million player in return, right? And you have just so far pocketed that $12 million. At the same time, the rest of MLS is spending 8 figures, over $10 million on the likes of Wilfried Zaha and Latte Lath and Marco Reus and obviously Lionel Messi. And it's just, you can't compete in this league if you're not going to spend money. And I was really supportive of the Gomez and Chicho and Barajas sales because I figured you would use that money to improve the club. And in the end, they haven't. So far, they have pocketed it. And even their outgoing kind of PR on this has been, hey, we would like to sign a striker if it is cheap. What they told Tom Bogert yesterday, hey, we want Duncan McGuire or Brian White or Oliafemi, those guys are $4 million strikers. Pony up and pay for a $10 million striker already, right? In the end, if you want to compete in current MLS, you can't be cheap. If you want to be at the bottom of MLS, if you want to just sneak into the playoffs every year, cool. If you want to lose in the first round of CONCACAF Champions Cup every year, then by all means spend nothing on your team. But in the meantime, you're letting a lot of fans down. And then to go around and ask those fans to pay for higher season ticket prices and $18 beers, it just is pretty bad management. It's not cool. And I think it's fair for them to get a ton of criticism. So look, the RSL season ticket member town hall is tonight. I'm not going to be there. I know a lot of angry season ticket fans are, and I hope that ownership is going to be there as well. And I hope they hear those complaints from fans because, quite frankly, like what they've done to the club over the last 9 months isn't right, isn't fair, isn't good.
Yeah, typically I'll try to provide context and push back, but I'm not sure that I can in this scenario. You kind of just alluded to the fan base. I wonder, before I set you loose, I will ask you this because you have a pulse on these fans in a way that I don't. Is the goodwill of, the early returns of this ownership group willing to invest and spend money and all that, do you feel like it's starting to wear off and now there's more questions about this club than there was, prior to?
Yeah, and I don't know that it's more questions about them than prior to, right? Like Deloitte sucks. I do think that the fans are cognizant of what's going on, and I don't want to use the word fickle, but I want to use the word like attentive. And while the team had investment and while the team was playing well, yes, the fans are going to be on board. And when the team is being thought of as a third priority in an ownership group, or while the team is not being invested in, and while the team is at the very bottom of MLS standings, and when they lose to a Costa Rican team, then yeah, the fans are going to be upset about it. Like, I think sometimes sports managers see the fans as like these completely unfair people who don't understand the realities of the business, but like, I disagree with that. I think Salt Lake fans and Utah fans in general are actually pretty smart about what they're seeing on with their sports teams and on RSL's field especially. And it just has not been anywhere close up to snuff so far. So, I certainly hope that changes. And I'm someone who has supported their moves in the past with the understanding that the investment would continue to be there, given that it hasn't been. That has been, then my understanding and my support of them is dependent on them continuing to make good decisions.
Will you be there Saturday? Will you be on your feet? And will you shout it out on Saturday?
I absolutely will.
Okay.
Right? Like, and yeah, I'm in. Like, I'm not going to do a, boycott or anything like that. This club means a lot to me, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of these games still. And look, if that's all RSL wants from me is my money, I'm going to continue to give them my money. If they want my support, and I think I speak for a lot of fans in this way, then and my positivity, then it's going to have to be better in terms of results and in terms of what we see in the transfer market.
Well, it's hard to argue with that, man. It's been a rough start. Right, Andy, thanks for the time, brother. Have a good weekend, all right?
Hey, man, thanks.
All right, Andy Larson, Salt Lake Tribune. Time now for your chance to win tickets to see the Utah men's basketball team. Your chance is running out. Let's support these young men and send them out, as only a couple of home games left. They've had a tough week, obviously, with the news that their head coach has been fired. So if you want to go to one of the final two games, text Utes to 33986 for a chance to win Utah men's basketball tickets. That's Utes to 33986 for a chance to win tickets to see the Utah men's basketball program. All right, coming up on the other side, a really cool sound after the game last night. So McHale Center, that's where the team was to play Arizona. Arizona's head coach had some really cool things to say after the game about Craig's sons who showed up and did their jobs, because that's what, you kind of got to do. So the human side of this is real. We're going to play that sound for you coming up on the other side. Tim McMahon will roll by in the 4 o'clock hour. Do a little sports court later on as well. A lot to do on a Thursday drive. Keep it right here on ESPN 700. All right, we got Tim McMahon rolling by. Little NBA today, little NBA Daily Assist on the program. Good stuff from Neil Smith to start things off. The Utah Hockey Club is back in action tonight against Minnesota. And then Andy Larson stopped by as well. So a lot to do on the program. Last night, University of Utah men's basketball team at McHale Center against Arizona. And they got worked. They got smoked. Thought that they would. Arizona's really good. And obviously the Utes are in flux. But Tommy Lloyd, the head coach of Arizona, after the game, had some really cool comments because as we talked about, the news came down that Craig had lost his job. The University of Utah has decided to fire Craig Smith, no longer the head coach of the men's basketball program. The national search, according to the release, is on. And Coach Eiler, the interim head coach, his first task was to take on Arizona McHale, which is just impossible. So Arizona won the game, no surprise there. But we've tried to cover this through the prism of the human element of it because the media oftentimes ignores that. And consumers and fans kind of want to know, like, hey, what happened? Why did he get fired? And then what's next? And I thought Tommy Lloyd did a great job of putting some context and color on the conversation. So if you missed Tommy Lloyd post-game last night, here's that sound.
Brady and Landon Smith are Craig's kids. And one's the director of operations, the other's a walk-on. And both those kids showed up today, and which is pretty amazing. I mean, I know you guys, this is a business, and it's a hard business, and I get all those things, but, like, we all have families. We all have kids. And for his kids to show up today, and, you know, and Craig, I talked to him today, and didn't have one bad word to say. Straight class. For his boys to show up today with their teammates, it says something. This stuff's hard. What we go through, even when it's going good, it's hard. And I know you guys have opinions and this and that. This isn't against the media. This is just society in general. And us guys that decided to coach, there's a lot of really cool things that come with it. But there's a lot of tough stuff. There's a lot of tough days. And you know what? There's a lot of times your family gets neglected because what we're doing to try to, you know, to prove our worth as a coach, to prove our value, to prove that we belong at this level. And so I got a lot of respect for those two young men.
Yeah, the video of that, he's emotional. He's trying to hold back tears as he's describing this. And look, when it comes to coaches, certainly in pro sports, but college sports too, a lot of people, you know, they see buyouts. And after, you know, Jimbo Fisher lost his job at Texas A&M and he got paid a cool like $90 million just to go find something else to do. I understand that the way this stuff works, these guys are hired to be fired. And because of that, the ecosystem of coaching in college athletics and in the pros is if you are fired, there's a nice golden parachute to take you into your next phase of life. So that's kind of what everybody focuses on. But I can tell you, there are a lot of people I know that have a lot of money that aren't very happy, right? And so when it comes to Craig and his family, there's a human element here with his wife, and I think they have 4 children. So Lance is the oldest, and this is his first year as the Utah men's basketball director of administration and operations. And his other boy is a walk-on, Brady, played at Salt Lake Community College. And I thought that was a really cool thing for Tommy Lloyd to do, you know, ultimately to kind of point out that, because I'm sure it's hard on those young men. Can you imagine if your father was fired and you're asked to just go to work the next day at the place who fired him? Probably be a tough thing. So Utah men's basketball, they take the L against Arizona last night at McHale. Arizona is probably the second best team in the conference. BYU might have something to say about that. The Utes will have Arizona State and West Virginia at home before they close the season in Provo on March the 8th at BYU. All right, special guest live in studio. I've been telling you guys about my friends at Ogden Clinic Hadley Dermatology. They've got a bunch of deals for you going on right now. So just to review the deals that they have currently, then we'll kind of get to our guest and see what we have to say about the latest. You can get 20% off of Botox. You also have 25% off of laser treatments. They have injectables. In addition to the free consultation to check out your entire body to see where you're at. If you're like me and the sun is about to shine consistently, you're going to be outside all the time, golfing or hiking, and we lead the nation in skin cancer diagnosis per capita, which I didn't know that. So get checked out and make sure you're good. Give them a call at 801-657-5664. It's 801-657-5664. And our guest in studio is my favorite of all the ones they send, CP. Christine, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me.
Let's turn her mic up just a little bit. Thanks for coming in live in studio. I always appreciate it. And like I said, I prefer you over certainly Jason or Michael.
Well, thank you.
So it's great to see you. All right, so I'm going to give you the floor here. Last time you were here, we talked about the deal on Botox for Valentine's Day.
Yep.
And today you've got something else in mind, Christine, so let's hear about it.
Well, this is something I see a lot of patients for this time of year, especially, is dry, itchy skin. We're in Utah. We have a dry climate. It's cold, low humidity, and a lot of people will come in with just a lot of itching. And there's a few tips and tricks that you can do to avoid this. But then there are some things that you probably should know that if those aren't working, maybe there's an underlying problem that should be worked up. So one of the easiest things is to take shorter, cooler showers. And this is a tough one because long, hot showers just feel so good right now. But it actually pulls a lot of moisture out of your skin, and it tends to make you feel really itchy.
Yeah, I don't want to hear that. I like my long, hot showers.
I know. And the second that's really easy is put on moisturizer.
Okay.
And doing that right when you get out of the shower is the easiest time. It helps to seal in some of that moisture that you've lost.
So shorter, cooler showers, and then as soon as you get out of the shower, moisturize.
Moisturize.
Do you have a moisturizer you would recommend?
We typically will recommend fragrance and dye-free products.
Okay.
Cetaphil, CeraVe, Eucerin have been some of my go-tos. But I'll take whatever people will apply.
Okay. But the best are fragrance-free, kind of
dye-free.
Dye-free. All right. So let's say somebody's listening that is experiencing the symptoms that you're describing, and they've tried things to prevent it, and it's not working. How can you guys help them in the clinic?
Well, seeing what they have on their skin is also helpful. So if they're doing these and it's not getting better, or if they're so itchy that they're causing either cracks or bleeding, it puts them at risk for an infection. There may be an underlying problem like eczema or psoriasis that they don't maybe know about yet. So it's good to see that because then there are prescriptions we can do that will help them through that.
Okay, so we've got dry skin. All right, so if you guys are dealing with that, definitely check out Hadley, Ogden Clinic, Hadley Dermatology. Let's reset some of the other deals that we've already kind of outlined so you can kind of help us as the expert here. And as I said, when Mike was in and he dropped the whole, like, we are the leading state in the country in skin cancer diagnosis per capita, it blew me away. I didn't know that. So if for our listeners, I keep talking about this, if they're like me and you, right, like you get outside all the time, when the sun is about to shine consistently, it's been a beautiful week. If there are listeners out there that have been golfing, hiking, biking, whatever for years and haven't been checked out, why should they get checked out, and what is that process like?
Well, typically it's the exposure you get when you're younger that will show up later in life. So as you get older, these things might start showing up, and it may not be something that's on your radar yet. So just even getting a baseline to see, are there any spots that are maybe starting to change or maybe not healing and going away, it's much easier to treat those before they progress.
And that is just something where people come into the clinic and they see someone like you or someone like Jay, and you go into a room and you check them out, and then you go from there.
Pretty much, yeah. We look at whatever skin you want us to look at.
Is there anything people can do themselves to like let's say somebody's listening and they are curious about a mole. Now, this is not my world, so I'm just guessing. Is there anything that you could tell them, like if your mole looks like this, or if there's a spot on your stomach that looks like that, you need to get in? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Anything that looks different from what you have is always kind of something we want you to come in for. The ugly duckling is not something we want to see. So if you get a new spot, but it looks like another spot that you already have, that's probably okay.
Okay.
But if you get a new spot and you're like, well, gosh, this looks different than anything else, we probably want to see that. Or if a spot has been the same forever and it starts changing, especially in an asymmetric way with either shape or color.
Interesting.
Like to look at those two.
Okay, let me reset. Last time we talked Botox. And, if any of our listeners, if your wife, your girlfriend, or men get it too, but, if you got a birthday coming up and your wife has always talked about wanting Botox, let's talk about what that process entails and what sort of benefits that it has.
Botox helps with fine lines and wrinkles. It can actually be a preventative for resting wrinkles. So if there's just an area, a lot of times around the eyes, in between the eyes and the eyebrows, the forehead, these are all really common areas that people like to have done. It prevents the muscles from moving in those areas so you don't get a wrinkle created by motion then.
Okay. You were laughing when I said men come in too.
They do. It's not funny, but they do.
Well, what was funny? Not funny?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I was just genuinely curious. So men or women, Botox is on the table. All right, final one, laser treatments probably is exactly what it sounds like. If you have hair and you don't want hair there, you can laser the hair off, correct?
It can be removed, yes.
Is it that simple?
It can be a process, but even after a few treatments, you notice a big reduction in hair. So.
Okay. All right, there you go. So we've got a menu for people to choose. If you want the deal on the free consultation to check you out to make sure that your spots are good, that's good. We've got 25% off of laser treatment. We've got a discount on Botox, and you now have the tips that you need to make sure that that dry skin will go away. Short, colder showers, moisturizer after the shower,
Easy stuff.
sunscreen before you go outside.
Absolutely.
And you guys have a deal on your sunscreen at the clinic as well.
Yes.
All right, so there you go. Give them a call right now at 801-657-5664. That's 801-657-5664. 801-657-5664, or visit HadleyDermatology.com. Christine, great to see you.
Thank you so much.
All right, Tim McMahon joins us coming up next right here on ESPN 700. Utah Jazz are off tonight. Welcomed in the Sacramento Kings last night. They lost, but Walker was really good. Minnesota. Rudy Gobert, our old buddy, back in town tomorrow night. Speaking of our old buddy, time now for your NBA Daily Assist. Thursday afternoon, our guy, Tim McMahon. Tim, happy Thursday, sir. How are you?
Hey, partner. How you doing?
I'm well. I have to say, I thought about you today when news broke that Ian Rappaport and Jordan Schultz had a heated exchange at a Starbucks. I've got to know, Tim, at some point, you got a little fire in you, Ben McMahon. Have you ever had a intense back and forth with a fellow reporter throughout your career?
Oh, I've had a handful, to say the least. There's one, and I'll protect. I won't say the name to protect the not so innocent, but there was one particular gentleman who we got into a confrontation that turned mildly physical, but just mildly, and things blew over until he got a rough performance review, and he brought it up in his performance review, and his boss called my boss, and so that one got a little bit sticky. But it's been a while. I like to think I've grown and matured.
You have calmed. You're even kind of nice to me. Not entirely nice to me, but kind of nice to me. Wait, this actually got a little, like, are we talking pushing and shoving?
A little pin against the wall type of thing.
Wow.
A little pin against the wall type of thing. No harm, no foul. I mean, probably a foul, but I think it was not even a flagrant one.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So, Tim, the Jazz stuff has been tough all year, as we've talked about. But when cool things happen, let's talk about cool things. And, Walker last night he was special. It was historic. I mean, two players in the history of pro basketball put up the stat line Walker put up last night. And it was against a really good big in Domo Sabonis, who's just eaten the Jazz lunch over the past few years. Walker, 10 of 10 from the floor, 25 points, 14 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals. Only Nikola Jokic and Wilt Chamberlain have done that in an NBA game. So, again, they lost. We know the deal, but a really cool night as it pertains to Walker Kessler.
Yeah, and honestly, I think Walker Kessler has been the best thing about the Jazz season this year. You can say it's damning him with faint praise, but, great rookie year. Last year, I think, he would even qualify as disappointing. And then, this year has been able to reestablish himself as he's a quality starting big. And, for a team that is searching for long-term foundation pieces, long-term core pieces, I think he's the one guy from the last 3 drafts that you can say, hey, he absolutely fits that bill. There's no question that Walker Kessler can be a quality starting big man in the NBA for, a decade or so to come. So this was a highlight of what's really been a very good season for him individually, despite the fact that obviously overall as a team, they have not won much and are not trying to win that much.
And I don't know, Tim, that they're going to try to win even next year. So your guy, Jonathan Givony, Jeremy Wu as well, piece today, really good in-depth, well, it wasn't today, but a couple of days ago, really in-depth piece about the class next year. Nate Emmett, Cameron Boozer, A.J. Debanza, Darren Peterson. A.J. is going to be playing his college ball here. But after reading what Givony had to write about, like, he thinks Peterson's the number 1 prospect and AJ's 2. Then it's the Boozer board. Cam will be 3, and then Nate Emmett 4. But based off of what Givony's saying about these top 4 players, I don't know if this fan base will see a serious approach next year. And who knows what will, the offseason will bring. But it feels to me, Tim, that we're in for another year of what we just experienced. Is that kind of what your gut's telling you?
I mean, I think the best way to put it is the Jazz are early in a rebuild, and that's typically not like a, quickie type of process. We'll see what kind of lottery luck they have. We'll see if they are able to get a guy like, let's say they win the lottery, they get Cooper Flagg. Does Cooper Flagg come in and drive winning immediately? I think that's asking an awful lot of a guy who, if he didn't skip a grade, if he didn't reclassify, would be a senior in high school right now. So I think it's just kind of part of the natural process. But yeah, if I'm a Jazz fan, I'm not expecting like some jump in wins next year for sure.
All right, so let's move off it, and let's talk about the things that are a little bit more exciting and a little more pertinent to the world of pro basketball. First of all, from a macro standpoint, Tim, don't look now, but the past week I've watched NBA games and I'm seeing NBA players playing really, really hard. And maybe that's just this time of year. It is a reminder of how great this game is when the best players take it seriously. I think the narrative of lackadaisical play is starting to go away here with some pretty intense high-level basketball since the All-Star break, yeah?
Well, yeah, and then look, there's teams like you don't have to worry about whether the Detroit Pistons are playing hard. That's a franchise and a bunch of guys, young guys on the roster who have a bunch to prove. And it's a pretty cool story. The Detroit Pistons have won more games so far this season than they did the last 2 years combined. The Detroit Pistons woke up a year ago today with 8 wins on the season. They are on an 8-game winning streak right now. So, and look, if you're in Salt Lake City, it's a rebuild. There's obviously pain that comes along with that. This is a team that's been through the pain and has been able to make that jump this season. You've got to find the guy to build around, and they've got that with Cade Cunningham. And then it's about surrounding him with the right pieces. So, they got to a point where they had a guy they wanted to build around. They brought in some vets that fit and gave him just some room to breathe. And, the Pistons, I don't know if they're going to win a playoff series this year, but the fact that they're going to be in one and that they're going to be a tough matchup for somebody is pretty amazing progress considering they won 14 games last year and set an NBA record for the longest losing streak.
Former Jazz GM Dennis Lindsey helping out over there, which is pretty cool. Happy for him. And, when we always try to draw parallels between teams that are further along in advanced rebuilds, I try to bring it topically as far as what the Jazz are doing here. But you referenced it, right? Like they have Cade and Orlando has Banchero. Like it is just the one thing that somehow, some way the Jazz need to find. As good as Lowry is, I just don't know that he is the guy to build around when it comes to eventually being back into contention. It is the one outlier that all of these advanced rebuild teams seem to have that the Jazz just right now have not been able to find.
Well, and that's why you tank, to be honest with you. Because where was Paulo picked?
Right.
Where was Cade Cunningham picked?
Correct,
like that. The easiest way to get that level of talent is to pick very, very early in the draft. It's hard to do. It's hard to trade for those kind of guys as a rebuilding team, especially. And let's just be blunt. Like in a market like Salt Lake City, where you're earning a rebuild, it's impossible to sign that kind of guy in free agency.
Yeah, that's the bottom line. All right, we were all gathered around our television sets on Tuesday night, and obviously as the guy that wrote the book on Luka, you're the guy to talk about this. And I feel like, at least through the television, Tim, it felt like there was a lot of buzz in that arena, of course, with Luka taking on the Mavs for the first time. I wasn't sure if Nico was going to show up. He did. The over-under I said on the show for Luka points was 40. He didn't touch that, but he did get a triple-double. I'm really curious as to see what it looks like when they go down to Dallas, but what was it like to be in the building, and what was your takeaway as we saw Luka play his former team for the first time?
Yeah, and, I thought Luka played well with the exception of shooting the ball. I thought he played a very kind of poised and focused game. The Mavericks were determined not to let him go off. They're obviously trapping and doubling him a lot to make sure he didn't have that 40-point type of performance. And he doesn't have his legs right now. And he's had one good offensive performance, one good scoring performance, I should say, for the Lakers, since the trade. He doesn't have his legs. You can tell when he's not making threes. The thing that I think surprised me was I thought this would be a full Luka Rage type of performance. And you saw a little glimpse of that, like midway through the fourth quarter. He knocks down that three at the timeout. He looks at the Mavs bench. He's glaring. He's yelling, all that kind of stuff. But there wasn't a whole lot of back and forth. He made a point, like he pretended, I didn't see Nico. Okay. Like he made a point not to have any level of interaction with Nico Harrison or with Jason Kidd, which tells you that Luka doesn't quite buy this. J Kidd wasn't aware of anything until the 11th hour stuff, and I would put myself in that same boat. But the prevailing emotion from Luka in terms of the Mavericks, I don't think is anger right now. I think it's more sadness. And I think he will find joy with the Lakers. I think he's searching for it right now. And it's not look, they're going to win games. He's got a good relationship with JJ Redick. Looked up to LeBron his entire childhood. Loves Dorian Finney-Smith, the teammate he had in Dallas. I think Luka's going to be just fine. Is going to have a great run here with the Lakers. But he's still getting over basically getting dumped publicly and shamed on his way out the door.
You referenced the Jason Kidd element here, the Jason Kidd side of this. And look, far more about this situation than probably any media member, let alone me. I just thought as a head coach, it would be really hard to see a player like that traded away, because if you have Luka, you got a shot, and these guys are wired to win. And Jason Kidd, once upon a time, was as fierce a competitor as a player as anybody, as you know. So now that a few weeks have passed, have you been able to kind of uncover exactly what he knew when he knew it and the hand he played in this decision, if any at all?
I can't tell you what he knew in terms of the trade discussions and all that. I can just tell you he was absolutely as frustrated with Luka as Nico Harrison was in terms of the diet, the conditioning, all the stuff that I've talked about, I've reported, been reported by other people. Nico was not on an island with that. J Kidd was right there with him on that. And I can also tell you that Jason Kidd was right there with Nico in terms of his fondness for Anthony Davis. Nico obviously had a decades-long relationship with AD, from Nico's time at Nike. Aside from Kobe Bryant, he was probably closer to AD than any other player that he worked with there. But Jason Kidd also has a really good relationship with AD. Remember, J Kidd spent a couple of years as an assistant coach in LA before getting hired as the head coach in Dallas. And one of those years, they won a championship in the bubble. AD was his guy. So, again, I'll put it like this. I don't think Jason Kidd was disappointed by this trade. I'm very confident in saying that.
So, I always hesitate to, bring things on the internet into real life because I don't know how real it is. It just seems like there is a bit of a smear campaign going on from the Mavericks, because every time I fire up NBA Twitter, it's smoking a hookah and drinking beers. And then there's pictures of Luka, and a lot of people are, it's a different era in a lot of different ways, not just in basketball, but society. We could talk about back in the day, the party habits of a Michael Jordan, the partying habits of a lot of players back then. Certainly I saw it, I was around a lot of it. And the younger generation just doesn't seem to have a different relationship and the fundamental understanding of the dangers of maybe alcohol and drug use and such. So maybe it's a different mindset just overall. But is this Dallas behind the scenes trying to, because I'm just of the opinion you can't spin this. It's a bad trade you don't make no matter what. But is this Dallas behind the scenes trying to spin it to help people understand that maybe this is something they needed to do?
I don't know if it's so much even trying to spin it, but just what were you thinking? Well, this is why they made the trade. And look, it is not breaking news that Luka Doncic likes to have a brewski or twoski, right? Did you know that before he was traded?
I was aware, yes, Tim. I was aware.
Of course you knew that before he was traded. It is not breaking news that the man's got a voracious appetite and sometimes can get pretty pudgy. You knew that. You've watched him throughout his career. You've seen him. I reported going back to J Kidd's first year, Rick Carlisle's last year. Luka was tipping the scales over 260 back then, and in both of those seasons. This has been something that's been a constant issue. It's just for all of those concerns, you say, well, okay. He also made 5 straight first-team All-NBA squads. He also led the league in scoring last year, almost averaged a triple-double, and, took your team to the finals. So I don't necessarily think I don't think it's a whole lot of, hey, here's new stuff, because, dude, the hookah stuff, honestly, the hookah thing, I don't think was a big concern. Did he have hookah on vacation? Sure. Okay, whatever. The beer drinking, all that stuff, that's much more of a concern simply because it gets to the weight and it gets to, all those the concerns about his body breaking down. But it's not like people just realize that Luka likes to drink a beer.
Do you feel like, and it's weird because I guess there's no way of fully knowing. I mean, I can tell you that I saw firsthand myself the past iteration of the Jazz with Donovan and some of those guys. They like to have a good time in certain areas here in Salt Lake City and certain places where Donovan lived. There were a lot of parties that were being thrown. But is there a different approach with the younger generation juxtaposed to kind of the old guard? Look, I know nobody's smoking heaters at halftime like Vlade was, but is there
right.
Is there like a different cultural approach in pro basketball to taking care of their bodies in a way that maybe it wasn't a thing back in the day?
I mean, there's obviously a lot more science involved in it. And, I think it's a much higher priority for teams. So it becomes a higher priority for players. But like, if you think Luke is the only guy in the league that enjoys having a drink or six, then I don't know what to tell you. There's this big wine culture in the NBA. Like, okay,
yeah.
I don't know, man. I get like the fact that he gained weight during the season last year while leading the league in usage rate and playing 38 minutes per game is, with a full-time quote-unquote body team. Like, I get it. That's pretty alarming. But I don't think the guy's like waking up and pouring beer in his Cheerios or anything. Okay. Like, I'm like, I understand the concerns with the beer drinking because it becomes a conditioning thing. I would be cautious on portraying this guy as having like a serious alcohol problem. I just think that Luka's post-game routine is very similar to mine.
Right, and I've experienced that routine. It's a fun routine.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of times I think his off-season routine is similar to mine too. Certainly the All-Star break routine at times.
For sure, and there's nothing wrong with it. You work hard. You should enjoy life. I'm not a live to work guy. I'm a work to live guy, and I think people should approach you that way. Nothing wrong with it at all, especially when he went to the finals a year ago. Like, it couldn't be that big of a deal. So Dallas, obviously, Tim, right now with their grip of injury issues with their bigs. What's interesting? Kyrie is kind of coming out on the other side of this as like this hero, right, for Dallas fans. And this is a guy that was a lightning rod for criticism not that long ago. A lot of people didn't even want to touch him. Some went as far as to say he shouldn't play pro basketball anymore. But what do you make of like the Kyrie side of this? And whenever he locks in the way he did against the Lakers, I'm reminded that once upon a time I did enjoy watching him maybe as much, if not more, than any player in the league. But you cover the team. What do you make of like the Kyrie kind of coming out looking like maybe a hero for Dallas in this whole thing?
Well, I don't think that is something that's a sudden development. I think that was the case last year too. Now, the difference is, he's like, it's kind of his team now, right? And he's the guy who's probably handled this the best in terms of like empathetic towards Luka, and they still have a relationship, they still got a brotherhood, but hey, you can whine and cry, but Luka's not coming back. Kyrie's got a team to lead. He's got games to try to win, and has been handling his business as far as that goes. But I don't think there's been a sudden shift in the Kyrie storyline. I think he kind of earned his way into the hearts of the Mavericks fans, certainly last year, and especially during the playoff run, but even before that. And, the simple fact is Kyrie has been the leader of this team. He wasn't their best player last year, but he was absolutely the leader. He was the primary voice in the locker room. And, despite his track record of chaos and his previous stops, he has been a constant source of like calm for the Mavericks. And that's something they obviously really, really needed after the NBA, much less the franchise, was rocked by this shocking trade.
Well, my take remains, do not make that trade. There actually is a lot to like about the Mavericks roster if they can get right. Lively, Gafford, and obviously AD. So where are we at with those three? Do you think they can get back in time to be in shape for the playoffs? And if so, what's the ceiling for this Mavericks team this year?
Talking to my people with the Mavericks, the hope is that they're going to get 2 or 3 weeks of AD and Lively together at the end of the regular season. How much rhythm and rapport and, kind of chemistry can you establish? And I don't know if it's going to be 8 games, 10 games, whatever it may be. I don't know, but that's the reality of the situation. That's what they're going to have. There's not as much optimism that Gafford's going to be able to get back and be a significant part of this. Grade 3 sprain of the MCL basically means he tore his MCL. So he definitely has the toughest injury of the 3 to deal with. But so Gafford Lively and AD are supposed to be reevaluated next week. They're not returning next week, but they will, if things continue progressing as they are, get back at some point in March.
Are you buying the optimism in Golden State? I think they're 7-1 with Jimmy Butler, and a lot of people. And look, Jimmy has shown us that come playoff time, he's one of those dudes. You just have to admit that he is. So I'll ask you the same question: are you buying that optimism, and what's best case scenario for Golden State this year?
I'll splash and crash. Splashes Steph, crashes Jimmy. You like that?
I like that's really good. It's really good.
Yeah. They're definitely better than they were before the trade. And obviously, look, Steph, Draymond, I mean, they've got some guys who are big-time champions that you have to respect. Jimmy Butler's, really had 2 overachieving Heat teams make the finals in large part because he is one of those dudes who can just absolutely dominate playoff series. I don't think they were going to win the West. Like, is it within the realm of possibility? Sure, but I don't think they have like even a double-figure percentage chance of winning the Western Conference.
Who keeps Mark Dagnall up at night? Is it Denver more than anyone else?
Yeah, I think Denver, and honestly, yes, Denver's the one who's the biggest challenger. I don't think there's any question about that. But I don't think anybody's like just super excited about seeing a Luka LeBron tandem in a playoff series. The Lakers have a hole in their roster. I mean, clearly they thought they needed a starting rim-running center, and they flunked Mark Williams on his physical, so that didn't happen. But the Lakers they've been playing good basketball even before the Luka trade. Even without AD, and Luka's not himself quite yet, but we've seen what that guy can do in the playoffs. For sure.
A reminder of how fleeting this stuff is. Since you and I last spoke, Victor Wembanyama shut down for the year, and Greg Popovich will not coach the Spurs this season. I'm anticipating them losing the rest of their games and drafting Cooper Flagg to play next to Victor Wembanyama. But what are your thoughts, Tim, on the latest happenings in San Antonio?
Yeah, and I was there in Austin the day the Wemby stuff came out. So, I was able to talk to people with the Spurs. They are very optimistic that he's going to be fine long-term, that he's going to be able to be back for the start of next season. It's not going to be an issue throughout the course of his career. So that obviously is, it sucks that he's not playing the rest of the season, but, it's good news that they don't think this is something that's going to be a lingering issue or a Chris Bosh type of thing where it ruins a guy's career or ends a guy's career. I thought the news today with Pop isn't that he's not going to coach the rest of the season. We knew that. It's that he plans to coach next season. And we'll see how his recovery goes and how things progress. But, the short statement that he left or that he sent out, it ended with, the hope to return to coaching. And that's making it very clear that Pop is not limping off into the sunset.
All right, before I set you loose, some very inspirational news that Paul George is putting his podcast on pause to focus on the rest of the season for Philadelphia. What do they do, man? Like, how do you get out of this? What happens next in Philadelphia?
The Philadelphia top Sixers. Can they keep that top 6 protected pick? That's the big question. Embiid's about to get shut down. We know that. So that's the first big question. The second big question is, does Embiid try to get out of there? And then if he does, what kind of market is there for him? With almost, I guess after this year, it'll be like with almost $250 million owed to him over the next 4 years. I don't know the answers to those, but clearly a team that thought they won the summer. They had a little free agency parade, but it's a complete mess up there in Philadelphia. And the other big question is who's gonna lose their jobs? Who is going to pay for this mess by losing their jobs? Is Daryl Morey going to get a chance to clean this up? Is Nick Nurse a proven championship coach? Is he going to be the fall guy? It's not going to be a celebratory summer in Philadelphia.
The media member that you got physical with, was it McMenamin? That's my best guess.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't Dave. Although, listen, I am here in L.A. right now. We're about to go over in a little while here to the arena for a little Wolves-Lakers, and, we'll see what happens tonight. I'm not going to rule it out, that's for sure.
Get after him. I want a beef between McMahon and McMenamin, dude. Two of our favorites on the show. All right, Tim, enjoy the game, man. Thanks for the time, all right?
All right, appreciate it, brother.
Andy Larson claims he has a video of two local media members going at it.
I need to see that. It wasn't me, by the way.
It wasn't me. To quote Shaggy, great song. I'm going to think about my best guess.
Wasn't me?
No, don't sing it. I'm going to think about my best guess, and I'll give it to you before the end of the show. Two Salt Lake media members on video going at it outside. Oh, you know what? One of them's Tony.
It might be Tony.
My one guess is TJ. But we'll give you our guest before we say goodnight at 6 o'clock. Let's welcome in Ryan from the Dish Professionals. You would not want to get into it with Ryan from the Dish Professionals. He's a big, strong dude. But you can save money because he's very nice that way. 801-424-DISH. Internet, also your wireless, of course, your cable television. Save on all three by dialing 801-424-DISH. What's going on, Ryan?
This is just the best time right now to call and save money. This offer is super stacked. We lost that Netflix offer. I just got it back. It's only here for a limited time. If you sign up with Dish, you get Netflix ad-free version free for the next 2 years. Guys, if you have Netflix, this is literally money in your bank. It's just like $430. Thank you very much. You get the biggest, fastest DVR. It auto records your games, guys. It auto hops commercials. Nobody does this. It auto records the local channels. You have all the streaming apps available built into the system. They'll work on all your TVs. So you have one remote. You can bounce back and forth between streaming or traditional TV. You got a DVR that's recording what you want. Plus, you have access to content anywhere. And guys, it's cheaper than a lot of the streaming products are now because they raise their rates so much. Plus, it's going to be even more cheap, more or less expensive in the future because the price is guaranteed for 2 years. So call us up, get Netflix free, get the 2-year promotion. The price is guaranteed. We'll throw in movie channels, and I'll throw in dinner at JCW's. Plus, on top of that, Dish sends out 60, 70,000 of these pre-qual $300 or $500 gift cards. I'm going to check to see if there's one that got sent to you and you just missed it in the junk mail. And about 60% of the time, we find them, and then we'll attach that on top of that. So this has never been a better time. Tons of free stuff, cash in your pocket. Call right now, 424-DISH, 801-424-DISH.
There he is, Ryan from the Dish Professionals. We'll catch a quick break. We'll do a little sports court with our friends from Handy and Handy coming up. We'll launch into the 5 o'clock hour of the drive. Before we say goodnight at 6 o'clock on this beautiful, lovely Thursday afternoon, it's great to have you with us right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. It is Sports Court time. We do it every Thursday right about now with our friends over at Handy and Handy. Just Preston today, no Garrett. Preston, how we doing, buddy? Happy Thursday.
Hey, good, Spence. How are you doing? Happy Thursday.
I'm well. Is Garrett okay? Where's our guy? Is everything good?
Yeah, Garrett's okay. Traveling last week, a little under the weather today, so gave him the day off.
Okay, all good, all good.
Back next week.
All right,
sure.
great. We missed our guy, but let's get into it. I had not seen this story. Arizona State star running back, Ute fans know him well, Cam Skattebo, is being sued by a former teammate over a golf cart incident. What's going on here?
Yeah, we remember Cam Skattebo for this last game last year. He broke off two 50-yard runs that really pretty much turned the game, and he's going to be a draft pick in this coming draft. He had a really great year. When I saw the headline, I thought, oh, no, these football players out golfing, getting crazy, and they rolled a golf cart. That's kind of what I assumed, but that's not what happened. This is an incident that happened in 2023 summer, and the football team, like many, have golf carts that kind of shuttle some of the players from facility to facility. And what happened was alleged by this other player, his name is Matthew Checketts, is that they were going along in this golf cart, and there were instructions that the pound limit was 600 pounds. And our guy, Cam Skattebo, like college guys do, he came and jumped on the back of the golf cart and was holding on and was bouncing up and down, and the seat, part of it broke, and players fell off of it, and this Matthew Checketts claims that he suffered injury. So originally, he brought a lawsuit against the Board of Regents for the state of Arizona, which they oversee the state schools in Arizona State, and this was a golf cart owned by them. And I haven't seen the lawsuit, but I suspect it was alleging that there was some defects in it and that caused it to break. But now he has amended his lawsuit and brought our guy, his former teammate, Cam Skattebo, in and named him personally as a defendant in this because of his actions. And so we'll see what happens. It's not really clear what his injuries are, but they're alleging that his treatment was extensive. But in any case like this, Spence, you have to prove liability. And so he's made allegations against Cam Skattebo, and what it said, what he'd have to show is that Cam Skattebo was negligent. That's the term we use, that he did something unreasonable that contributed to or caused this and caused his injuries. And then he'd have to prove up his injuries as well. So he has some proof going on. And Cam Skattebo, I'm guessing, he's going to have a contract and potentially could pay a settlement or a judgment, but we'll see what happens. He's just been brought into this now.
Let's move over to really one of the most fascinating figures in the history of sports marketing. That's Sonny Vaccaro. And he's written a memoir, and I have not read it, and I'm just learning about it. But you wanted to discuss kind of his influence on American sports law based off the book, yeah?
Yeah, this isn't our typical story that we talk about, Spence, but I thought it was interesting to be a little bit different here. Sonny Vaccaro, I remember him as a guy that ran the ABC camps. He was big in sport, with Nike and Adidas. Early on, he was, I think, a lot of people thought if he was a Nike guy, he would go to Nike schools and make sure they got some players, and players would get to those schools, and then he shifted to Adidas. He was most notably, they claim that in this memoir that he knew NIL before NIL was ever a thing. And he has had some influence on the sports law. And most notably, he was the Nike guy who got Michael Jordan to Nike. And, if you've followed the story or even seen the movie, Jordan was headed to Adidas. That's all he'd ever worn. And, Sonny Vaccaro was very pioneering, and he was creative, and he went to Nike and said, let's get this guy and let's partner with him. And as we know, their partnership has resulted in a great deal for Nike, grew Nike, and great deal for Michael Jordan. He was also influential in helping the NBA Players Association. We know there was a window there where high schoolers could jump right to the NBA, and he was influential in that and setting that through the NBA Players Association. That window spawned LeBron, Kobe, Dwight Howard, Tracy McGrady, Kevin Garnett. I remember seeing Kevin Garnett, first guy to jump since like Moses Malone, and now that window has closed. But he was important in that. And, in these legal contracts, the other thing that he's been important in, he kind of influenced Ed O'Bannon. And We know the Ed O'Bannon lawsuit was brought against the NCAA, claiming that, on the video game, his picture was on it for the NCAA basketball game, stating that, hey, you did this without my authority and with my authorization to use my name, image, and likeness. And that lawsuit really spawned where we are today. It resulted in, he won that lawsuit. It resulted in the Alston lawsuit, which started the NIL, and now there's some in between there, but now we're into the House lawsuit, which is going to result in payment from the university schools directly to players. So Sonny Vaccaro has had a big influence, and he's been a really interesting figure, in the world of sports.
All right. It would not be Sports Court if we did not talk NCAA, so let's move over there now. NCAA athlete lawyers ask a judge to block House opt-in deadline. This was by our guy Michael McCann a couple of days ago. Preston, fill us in with the latest.
Yeah, the House settlement, it's supposed to go into place, I think, in the summer of this year. And I've kind of stayed away from talking about a bunch because almost every week there's something that happened in the House. And most notably, the NCAA settled with a bunch of players that were kind of objecting to the settlement, and they wanted to do this. They went ahead and settled with those players because they thought that getting this out of the way would help to further the House settlement. And then recently there was an anonymous letter from a bunch of athletes, and it was anonymous because they felt there would be a lot of retaliation. And they sent it to the judge saying that they were objecting to the House settlement. And what bits and pieces we have from it, we think this is coming from athletes in Olympic sports, because we know that this House settlement, who's it going to benefit? It's going to benefit most notably the football programs and the basketball programs that are the revenue-generating sports. But these Olympic athletes, they objected to it, saying, hey, how's this going to help us? So the latest is, as you mentioned, some lawyers, they submitted a letter to Judge Wilkins, who's been over this whole thing. And the letter, essentially, there's a rule right now that the NCAA has said that schools need to opt in to the House settlement by March 1 and essentially opt into the terms of the settlement. And these lawyers sent a letter. Now, this is just a letter to Judge Wilkins, and it basically says that schools that opt in would be subjected to new roster size limits outlined in the settlement, and this could risk athletes being prematurely cut from teams, and which would adversely affect athletes. So they're basically saying to the judge, hey, this is an arbitrary deadline, March 1. Players really haven't had a chance to jump in on that. And what could result from this, it's just a letter right now, and what could result is they could file on behalf of these athletes who aren't named right now a motion for a preliminary injunction or a temporary restraining order, which essentially would prevent this opt-in date from being enforced. And if they do that, well, there's going to be a big opposition from the other side, because right now everyone is pushing to get this House settlement. We know there's been the hurdles. It's gone back to the judge, gone back to the attorneys, and everyone's pushing for this to happen this summer because it will give some, we hope it gives some guidelines and some, not so much questions what's going on with NIL and that type of thing. So that's the latest in the House settlement.
All right, final one for today. Broncos assistant coach, linebackers coach, Michael Wilhoit, who is a cool 6'1", 250. This is a big dude, and he punched a cop. Fill us in here. What's going on here?
Yeah, we don't always bring this in, but athletes and coaches doing bad things usually crops up every week. But, yeah, our guy Michael Wilhoit was at the airport. Just the facts are, this just happened this last weekend. He was at the airport, illegally parked his truck, got out of the truck to run into the airport. You can't do that. And an officer said to him, hey, you can't do that. And Michael responded in a not-so-kind way, shut the heck up. And it resulted in things escalating. And Wilhoit allegedly pushed the cop. The cop pushed back, and Wilhoit punched him. Wilhoit got in his truck, and the officer tased him. And crazy, Wilhoit was able to drive away after being tased, and now he was arrested, detained, put in jail, and charged with felony assault. Not just felony assault, but felony assault on a police officer. And he showed up in court, and $5,000 bail to get out, and the judge came out and just said, hey, I'm really concerned about these are routine everyday things, and you can't just, with a lot of people around, you can't just not stick to the rules, and it's troubling that it escalated to this extent where a police officer was punched. So Michael Will Hoyt is in trouble for the time being.
All right, Preston, before I set you loose, for any of our listeners who have any legal questions, how can they get a hold of you over at Handy and Handy?
Yeah, we'd love to hear from anyone out there and hear about your legal issues, and if we can serve as a legal resource, especially if you have a case in the area of personal injury, we'll make sure we help you out. Call us at 801-264-6677 or jump on our website at handylawutah.com. You can submit your questions there and learn about us.
All right, Preston, thank you, my friend. Have a great weekend, and as always, go Utes.
Thanks, Spence. Go Utes.
All right, give them a call if you have any legal questions. Our good friends over at Handy and Handy. We'll get to the 5 o'clock hour of the program today. It's kind of a light night on the local scene, but the Utah Hockey Club is in action. They're taking on Minnesota. That's a 7 o'clock drop of the puck at the Delta Center. Jazz were in action last night. They're off tonight. They're welcoming Rudy Gobert and the Minnesota Timberwolves. If you missed Neil Smith from earlier, we kind of gave you a little preview of the Hockey Club's game tonight against Minnesota. Every game left is a big game. Talked a little bit earlier today about Utah men's basketball heading down to McHale Center last night. First chance Coach Eilert had to coach his team on an interim basis, and it was against one of the best teams in the Big 12 in one of the hardest places to play. Some cool comments from Tommy Lloyd after the game about Craig's sons, both of whom are working for the program, showing up for work even though their dad lost his job. We replayed those comments a little bit earlier. If you missed this, I had Tim McMahon on, and Jonathan Gavoni, who covers the NBA draft and the world of prospects for the NBA draft, and his cohort, Jeremy Wu, posted a piece yesterday about the 2026 crop of NBA players. He talks about Nate Emmett, talks about Cameron Boozer, Carlos Boozer's boy, A.J. DeBonsa is going to be playing at Brigham Young next year, and then Darren Peterson, and goes over what he perceives to be 4 franchise-changing pieces for the 2026 class. Why do I bring that up? Well, if you're the Utah Jazz and you understand that you're not one piece away from being competitive, and you understand that you're not 1 or 2 pieces away from being amongst the Western Conference elite, is there a chance that you're in for the same thing as a Jazz fan next year that you've been suffering through this year? I think the answer is probably yes. Here's what Gavoni had to say about A.J. DeBonsa. He has Darren Peterson ranked as the number 1 prospect. Now, Darren Peterson is going to Kansas next year. He's been the best high school player in the country all year. He's going to be playing for Bill Self next year. He has the number 2 prospect as A.J. DeBonsa, and A.J., by all accounts, is the number 1 pro prospect, not just in this class, but maybe in the next couple of classes. So this is the first time I've seen A.J. number 2. But here's what he had to say about A.J. Averaging 26.2 points, 9.8 boards, 4 assists a game. DeBonsa's filling it up with the stat sheet consistently for Utah Prep. Every NBA team is searching for the 6'9" wing in DeBonsa's mold, who can score from anywhere on the floor, pass on the move, defend multiple positions, and bring nonstop intensity and competitiveness to every matchup. Headed to BYU, will have the keys to the offense and will likely be surrounded by a veteran group. DeBonsa will have every opportunity to show why he's worthy of being the number 1 pick. He has Cameron Boozer as the number 3 prospect and Nate Emmett as the number 4 prospect. But if there are 4 generational prospects, according to people that do this for a living in the way that most don't, you have to wonder if the Jazz have this in mind as they ultimately are looking what to do coming up next season. So we'll get to some college basketball storylines, the latest with the Utah men's basketball coaching search, and other NBA storylines coming up on the other side. We'll start the 5 o'clock hour of the program on this lovely Thursday. Do not want to cheat you 2 days. You're almost to the weekend. It's Thursday, so keep it right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, let's get it. Drive at 5 time. On a Thursday afternoon / evening, our streak of great spring-type weather rolls along this week as we are about to say goodbye to February. Coming up tomorrow, good riddance. That's my opinion. Congratulations. You got through January, about to get through February, but it's felt like spring all week. It feels like spring today. It's been about 50 degrees and clear and sunny here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. And as it is every single day, it's great to have you with us. 5 o'clock hour of the program today is brought to you by our good friends at Burt Brothers with over 30 years of experience in nearly 30 locations. Burt Brothers ASE certified technicians bring expertise and professionalism to every interaction. Talking industry-leading warranties and low-price tire guarantees. It's your one-stop shop for reliable repairs and maintenance, from tires and alignments to fluids and brakes. Offering a full range of automotive services tailored to meet your needs. Now offering value tire options such as Americus and Summit tires, starting at just $69 with warranties that go up to 70,000 miles. As one of the few AAA certified shops in Utah, Burt Brothers upholds the highest standards in automotive service. Stop by Burt Brothers or Tire Busters locations or schedule an appointment today to experience the trusted service that has made them a Utah favorite for over 3 decades now. Burt Brothers doing it better since day one. Information can be found online at burtbrothers.com. All right, kind of a quiet night tonight after a really busy night last night on the local hoop scene, but the Utah Hockey Club is in action, taking on Minnesota. Minnesota's a very good team. Bill Armstrong joined our program earlier in the week and essentially said that they have about 23 Game 7s left. Hockey Club's been really good as of late. They've won their last 3 games at home. They're 5-2 in their last 7. And they find themselves right in the mix for the wild card spot that we've all been talking about as the potential for them to qualify for this season if things go well. Hockey Club's on 61 points right now. That's 1 point clear of St. Louis. That's 3 points behind Calgary, 4 points behind Vancouver. Neil Smith joined us earlier, former general manager of the New York Rangers, host of the NHL Whip Around podcast. And Neil's opinion is the top 7 teams are locked in the West. And that would go like this. In the Central, it would be Winnipeg, Dallas, and Minnesota. In the Pacific, it would be Vegas, Edmonton, and the LA Kings in your wild card spots. Number 1 would be Colorado. He believes that's locked in, but he does believe that number 2 seed in the wild card race is up for grabs. So, big game tonight. Minnesota is a little bit banged up, but they're 3rd in the Central, just behind Dallas, and, of course, behind Winnipeg, who just doesn't lose. Winnipeg has won 11 straight games. Their differential is plus 73. It is historic. The second best differential is Tampa Bay Washington plus 63. So they're 10 points clear in differential than the second-place team in pro hockey, which is pretty wild. So on the local side of things, that's your main gig tonight, the Utah Hockey Club in action. Last night, BYU was the only local team to get that win. Utah went down to McHale and lost to Arizona, as we discussed on the program. Throughout the course of the day today, Josh Eilert's first task as the interim coach was to lead Utah to McHale Center to take on Arizona. And I was curious to see if there would be anything different rotationally, anything different schematically. I mean, this does, in a way, remind me of when Mike Bajakian took over for Coach Ludd on the football side of things, when Andy was let go, the offensive coordinator. And Mike's first media availability, it was a Tuesday practice post-media availability. When he was asked about the system, he said, look, this is Andy's system. This is Andy Ludwig's system. There's not really a whole lot that I'm going to adjust as the main play caller. I don't know what Josh is going to be able to do that Craig could not do with the roster that Craig put together and the system that Craig implemented. We did see more minutes from Keanu Dawes last night. He played 26 minutes and had a double-double. He had 18 points and 10 boards, and he was really good. He was kind of the one Ute that looked like he lined up with Arizona athletically, had a lot of putbacks, a lot of dunks, 10 boards, 18 points, 6 of 8 from the floor, even hit a 3, made all 5 of his free throws, which is something this team has struggled with. Lawson had 10 boards. Gabe just could not find any space. Once again, Arizona sold out to try to stop Gabe Madsen. He was 2 of 10, and all 10 of his shots were three-point shots. Did make all 4 of his free throws. Had 7 assists. He is evolving as a decision maker because when there are 2 and 3 guys assigned to make sure that they're turning your water off, you got to try to get your teammates involved. Ezra just simply struggled with Arizona's length. He was 6 of 17. He did have 18 points, got to the line 9 times. Interesting snapshot on the television broadcast of Ezra getting into his teammates early on, encouraging them to, crash the glass and play hard, because Arizona is probably the second best team in this conference. Caleb Love, one of the best point guards in America, had 23 points, 7 assists. He also had 4 boards, 6 of 12 from 3. But news made after the game, it was Tommy Lloyd, Arizona's head coach, who certainly seems like a great guy and obviously knows what he's doing, been in the business for a long time. And after the game, we played this for you earlier, Coach Lloyd was asked about the situation with Craig and got emotional, because this is a difficult industry, is a difficult business. And I know the walking line is lack of sympathy for coaches that have millions of dollars when it comes to their golden parachute if they lose their gig. And I get it. But the reason college coaches in football and basketball have their reps negotiate massive buyouts is these guys know that more often than not, you are hired to be fired. There are very few Bill Selfs. There are very few Mike Krzyzewskis. There are very few coaches that have a long, long runway and a long, long run. These guys are hired to be fired. That's why the negotiations include these golden parachute buyouts, and Craig's going to get roughly $5 million as his contract, goes for another couple of years. Utah also paying dead money to Larry Kraskowiak. No real runway or inside information or news about the coaching search. Just the Mark Harlan release that we read to you when it came out, that this will be a national search. They're already undergoing said search. I will tell you this. 2 sources have confirmed that Alex Jensen is currently in his final year of his contract as an assistant coach with the Dallas Mavericks. That seems to be the hottest name as far as what I've heard and what I've read. We've talked about a bunch of different routes that Mark Harlan could take. Does he go the route of a young head coach with a smaller school who's done a great job in that space and then elevate the coach to give him an opportunity to coach a Big 12 team and obviously make him a very rich man? Well, Mark did that with Craig. Does he try to go in a different direction? And does that direction include former Utes? Does it need to include former Utes, or should it include former Utes? I mean, I'll just ask you, what are your thoughts as a Utah basketball fan? Should you get an alert on your phone that the decision is Alex Jensen as the head coach and potentially Andre Miller, who's coaching in the G League, as an assistant? Is that something that excites you? Will you call the Utah basketball office and put down a deposit for season tickets next year? Which ultimately is something that needs to happen if this program is ever going to get back on track. As we've discussed, one of the things that Coach Witt has at his disposal every time there's a Utah home game, if you're down on the sidelines, recruits are all over the place, and that is a selling point to a 16, 17, 18-year-old young man. Do you want to come play here? Do you want to play in front of these fans? Do you want to be part of this atmosphere? And if we're honest, Craig never had that in his back pocket, to be able to bring in a recruit to show him the atmosphere at the Huntsman Center as something that could be appealing for a young player to play in front, as far as being around. I mean, all these guys want to play in front of fans. If you ever played on any level, it's always a lot better if you're playing in front of a crowd. It's fun, right? And if you don't have that as something you can offer, it's going to be tough to attract players to play here. And yes, I know that the bottom line is the bottom line. And if you have NIL funds and the collective is healthy and you're able to pay players, maybe it's not as necessary to have a massive crowd. I'm just saying that it would help. And I do believe in this scenario, Alex Jensen, Andre Miller, a bench like that would kind of inject this basketball community with some life that it hasn't had, quite frankly, for quite some time. So Utah goes to McHale, and they get smoked pretty good. It was over pretty quick, and, some decent moments in the second half. The final few games go like this. Arizona State coming up on March the 1st, so coming up this weekend. Then it's West Virginia, both at home. They'll finish the season coming up on March the 8th at Brigham Young. It's going to be an 8 o'clock time on ESPNU, and BYU has just figured it out. And Utah State lost to Boise last night, so with the Utes losing to Arizona and Utah State losing to Boise, Jazz lost to the Kings. BYU was the one local team that got a win last night. It was their their 5th straight win, but their 3rd straight game where they've scored at least 90 points. They've had at least 12 3-point shots. They've shot at least 50% from the floor, and they've had less than 12 turnovers. That hasn't happened with a college team this century, according to a stat that was going around on social media. So Kevin Young, BYU, they deserve a lot of credit right now, and they appear to be a lock for the NCAA tournament. And with the way they're built, if they're knocking down shots, they're going to be a tough out for anybody. And Richie Saunders is playing his way into a conversation about being first team All Big 12. Now, Arizona State only had 5 scholarship players available last night. They actually were really going to the bottom of the barrel off the bail. They only had 8 players dressed. Bobby Hurley played 7. And there were some decent moments from ASU last night where they looked like they had a chance to make it interesting, but BYU had an answer for everything Arizona State did. And now BYU, a top 25 team in the country, they've already surpassed their win total in conference play from a year ago. They already have 11 conference wins, and they're going to close out the season against West Virginia at home. They'll have a really tough one March 4th at Iowa State. And then, as I referenced, they'll finish the season against the University of Utah at the Marriott Center. They get 2 of those final 3, which is very realistic. That's a 13-win team in conference, which is a great accomplishment. And they'll have 22 wins on the season. Not really sure exactly what that seed will look like. But again, regardless of the seed and regardless of kind of where we're at with the Joe Lunardis of the world, depending on matchups. Now, remember what happened last year. BYU entered the NCAA tournament playing really well, and they lost. They were ousted. But this is a team that it is built, and they've evolved to a point where their decision-making is better. The turnovers have been down. If they hang on the glass, if they can rebound with their peers, and if they can limit turnovers, they're so dynamic on offense with the ability to knock down shots at such a high clip that as long as they don't have one of those random nobody can hit a shot nights, they have a chance not just to make the tournament, but do something that's pretty fun. And who knows, maybe advance a couple of rounds, maybe a Sweet 16 potential. I'm not sure if there's any potential beyond that, but that's the great thing about the tournament. You never know. Utah Jazz lost to the Kings last night, but that's not the storyline, at least in my mind. The storyline was history made by Walker Kessler. And Walker's had a really good year. This is not a kind of analyzing Walker in a vacuum one game. Walker's been good all year long. But what I liked most about last night wasn't just, look, 10 for 10 from the floor, did not miss a shot. 5 of 7 from the free throw line, which you love, 25 points, 14 boards, 5 assists, 2 steals. A stat line in and of itself that 2 players in NBA history have pulled off, Nikola Jokic and Wilt Chamberlain. But it's that he did it against Domantas Sabonis, who really has eaten the Jazz up every time he's played them over the past little bit. So, yes, the Jazz lost. We know what time it is. We know what they're trying to do. But at least in a vacuum, I thought Walker Kessler was really, really special last night and continues a phenomenal 3rd year, which is good news for Utah football fans. Junior Tafuna, Karene Reed, and Brant Keithy at the NFL Combine. And Junior Tafuna ran the fastest 40 time of the first group of defensive linemen. So good stuff there from Junior as the NFL Combine continues to roll along. 5.03 40 time for Junior. So shout out to him. All right. All right, wrapping up the program here on a Thursday afternoon. Some breaking news, I guess. Travis Kelce is going to play in 2025. So shout out to all the Swifties who love football now and know who Travis Kelce is. He announced it earlier today on the Pat McAfee show because that's the deal, I guess. So Travis Kelce back with the Kansas City Chiefs next year. Light night of local action. The Utah Hockey Club is in action tonight against Minnesota. Some good NBA games. Warriors and the Magic are going on right now. We've got Nuggets and Bucks. That's your early game on Turner. And then the Timberwolves and the Lakers from Crypto.com Arena. And the T-Wolves will be in town tomorrow. Rudy Gobert and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Mike Conley back in action in town for the team. Well, against the team they played for here once upon a time. They're all Jazzmen at some point. The Hornets and the Mavericks are also in action. Pelicans, Suns as well. So, yeah, light night on the local hoop side after a jam-packed night last night. So there you go. The hooligans have cleared the area. So no skateboarding going on outside, which, again, is a little bit nerve-wracking when you're leaving and there's a bunch of young people skating with cameras, obviously creating content for YouTube. We live in a society. There are rules here. Can we just respect the rules? Is that too much to ask?
Are you saying no skateboarding? Is that your rule?
No, not no skateboarding, but not like right outside in traffic. That's obnoxious.
That's fair.
They're stopping cars.
You have a fair point.
All right. Before we say goodnight, news broke today that Jordan Schultz, 2 NFL insiders got in a fight in Starbucks. Verbal altercation.
Also, just some context here. One of them is an heir to Starbucks.
Jordan Schultz, father Howard Schultz.
Clear.
Does he still own Starbucks or did he sell it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
At least, I mean, I don't know how much equity he's got in it at the moment or ownership, whatever it is, but there's, let's just say there's some pennies laying around.
I'm sure he's doing just fine. Jordan Schultz, his pop, Howard Schultz, owns Starbucks. Maybe this was intentional. And then Ian Rappaport from the NFL Network reportedly got into it at a Starbucks as a result of conflicting reports of a story that Tom Brady took Matt Stafford skiing. So, yeah, very mature behavior from these two. And so Andy Larson said that he has video evidence of 2 reporters from our market getting into it after a Jazz game.
Physically.
Well, did he say physically?
It was Tony and Sarah.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. He didn't say physically, right? I think he said they were just kind of nose to nose yelling at each other.
I think so.
I'm ready to give you my guess. You ready?
I'm ready.
Tony Jones, Eric Walden.
Okay.
That's my guess.
That might be actually it. And it's funny because we are just guessing. I have seen Tony like in those press rooms get, I'll say bothered. So we'll see. Maybe that's the one. Maybe we'll bring Tony on and grill him.
I know Tony was mad at me once. I came in here and Tony was mad at me once. I don't know what. I could just tell. Do you know why he was mad at me that one day?
Oh, in here? No.
He was doing, I don't know if he was filling in for Bill. It
Probably
was
me and Tony for Bill.
I think that's what it was. And I don't know, because sometimes I will call Tony out for what I perceive to be lack of entire transparency, if that's fair to say. Like, when he tweets out that he's 5'11" or whatever, I'm like, dude, if you're 5'11", I'm 6'4".
There we go.
Our guy's like 5'6", 5'7". So I know Tony can get a little emotional. He's my guy. Love him. And then I think at some point, Tony and Eric got side. So my guess is it is Tony Jones and it is Eric Walden as the 2 media members that got into it.
I can't disagree there. I don't have any like guesses off the top of my mind, but it wouldn't put it past them. I do know that like if that is the case, Tony and Eric are like buds. They'll make up. They'll be buddies afterwards. But I could see them getting after it as well.
Is there one media member you'd like to verbally accost in our market?
One.
That's my. Of course, there's one. I've got a nice list myself.
Yeah, I've got a list.
You said that with like a vindictive tone. Is there something you want to talk about? Air out on live radio right now?
I don't know if on air is the place to air it out.
Okay, fair enough.
But maybe one day.
Before we say goodnight, can you imagine being Junior Tafuna's size and running a 5.0340?
No.
That's impressive.
No. Yeah, if you can get anywhere near the 5s, right, when you work with those guys, they would love to see a 4 pop up on that screen, but that is really rare for any sort of defensive lineman, offensive, especially the interior guys. That's a good number for Junior. It will at least, and the little inside baseball here is that the scouts aren't going to look at that number. They're going to go in and say, oh, he ran the 40. Now let's go look at his first 10-yard split. That's the number they want to look at. And for Junior, it's a pretty good one. So that'll at least get some attention, some eyes on his film. And that's the goal at Combine Week.
Yeah, good stuff for Junior Tafuna today. Karene Reed, as well as Brant Keithy. Tyler Batty is there for Brigham Young. So the Combine rolls along for you NFL fans that are just starving for NFL content. All right, time to say goodnight, Porter. What comes our way on a Friday edition of the radio show?
We'll finish off the week with a little bit of everything. Howard Beck stops by for your NBA Daily Assist. We'll talk some golf, of course, with our friend Paul Pugmire of Utah Golf Radio. Some RSL with one Pablo Mastro, the gaffer. Gordon Monson might stop by, and then I'll probably shoot a text to Jordan Schultz.
Please do.
We'll go in that direction.
I've had Jordan on the show before. Would love to have Jordan on the show, or Ian Rappaport, either one. So stay tuned for a Friday edition of the program. We'll get that weekend started out the right way. But for now, we'll say goodnight. And a special thank you to Neil Smith, Andy Larson, and Tim McMahon. For the sound you may have missed from the show today, go to the website. It's ESPN700sports.com. Make sure to download our mobile app and take us on the go. It's a great way to listen to the station. But the best way to listen to what we do is by becoming a supporter and a subscriber to our podcast page. We call it The Drive with Spence Checketts. It's available wherever you get your shows. So wherever you get podcasts, get ours. So just search The Drive with Spence Checketts, subscribe, rate, review, say nice things, and give us all the stars. It actually does help out. For Porter, I'm Spence saying goodnight. Enjoy your Thursday evening. Talk to you on a Friday drive. As always, you can catch it right here on ESPN 700.